We're recording. Go ahead. Recording, so you're good. I'm already recording, so just.
Hey, George, we're recording, so just letting everyone know.
5 minutes.
Yep, give me 1 second.
I don't know, casual today.
God, I'm tall. I can't reach the floor. No, I can't read that.
I believe so. It is approximately 5:36. We're starting the meeting. Mr. Band,
Present.
Ms. Basner,
Here,
Mr. Gonzalez, Ms. Latone,
present.
Sam Raven,
He's on his way.
Ronald Sarkman.
Yes.
You have a quorum.
We have a quorum, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I've lost count of how many we've had, so I'm not gonna say it, but it's this is the Charter Ad Hoc Advisory Charter Review and Revision Board for February 12th. We called the roll. I'm gonna take an item out of order, actually not an item, but point of order. We have a distinguished guest here, Commissioner Suarez, who wished to address the group, so I'm gonna take him first, and then we'll get to the business of the meeting. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you very much.
George, appreciate it. Thank you. Hi, all. Commissioner Suarez. There is an item that I'm gonna be presenting on the 21st, and it's a matter of saving the city some money. And I'm going, just the way it's written now is we have to give notice through a general circulation newspaper. And we have to by charter. And that was written, I don't know, 8 years ago when Miami Beach was first established. And obviously today we're in a different world, and a lot of these newspapers charge thousands of dollars for ads. And I believe, Rafael, if you can correct me, we have to post all of our ordinances by charter on a newspaper general circulation. And that can cost, what are the costs associated with that?
As a matter of fact, the Herald just increased the rate last week for the for the neighbor section, which is what the city utilizes. So right now, for a single ad on the neighbors, a one-page ad is roughly between $750 and $800 is what they charge us per ad. What the commissioner was explaining is the fact that the state recently passed a statute allowing cities to do their public notice advertisement on a web page that is run by the county. So the county first must start this web page. The cities can join in and post their public notices. The county has for first reading this month that procedure to adopt the website. The problem that we have is even if the county approves it and the commission approves it, is that for whatever reason, we're one of the few municipalities that states that ordinances in our charter must be approved via publication in a newspaper of general circulation. That's contrary to what the statute says. It doesn't, so we have added an extra layer that's going to cost us a lot of money. So another thing that worries me is that the Herald, with this rate increase, we used to have multiple neighbor sections. Now the Herald has gone and done 2 neighbor sections, a north and a south,
Right.
which scares me because they continue to reduce what they're providing as far as neighbors, which my fear is that one day they're going to go and say, there is no neighbor, you need to advertise in the main paper, which costs
Even more.
between $3,000 to $6,000, depending on the size. So at the very least, we need to be prepared. So that needs to go out to the voters. So that's something that needs to be recommended by this charter review, which would be, I would recommend that you at least give us that option, even if the commission says no at this time, but give us the option to do it in the charter.
Yeah, and I'm asking, hopefully, one of the members of this board can take that item and put it on for our recommendation.
What would be the
Would that
downside?
be-
Movie the downside of taking this would seem pretty reasonable, particularly given that the circulation of the Herald has shrunk. People aren't using it as much, particularly if they ever used it to look for items such as this. I mean, can it be on the county website? Isn't the city has its own website?
So right now, what we do, because we do know that the neighbors and the Herald circulation is extremely low compared to what it used to be.
Right.
When, when everyone got a newspaper delivered to their home. We right now put on our website every ad that we put on the Herald. Because we fear that the Herald may not be the place where people are getting that information from. So we are already doing that step, but it doesn't count.
State requires us to.
And the ordinance says general circulation, I'd argue, those days are numbered, or gone. And appreciate it. Why wouldn't we want to save the city money?
So-
Is it, and my question ultimately is there a downside?
At the last commission meeting, when this was proposed a couple of months ago, it was stated that maybe some people in the city do not have access to the internet. But that's becoming less and less. So what we will do, which we're required to do by statute, is once a year, we're gonna publish in a newspaper of general circulation saying, by the way, we publish our ads,
There you go.
this is where you go to get this information.
Don't I get from the city though, every, I don't know if it's monthly or quarterly, some kind of publication that has all sorts of,
Yeah.
all sorts of stuff in it?
Yeah.
We put that in there as well,
Mm,
and every resident.
The
of the
notice
city
of where
gets
to
it.
go.
Well, yeah, if that's the question, the notice of where to go, absolutely,
You can do that.
But,
absolutely.
but even more than where to go, why not?
Because
publish-
every month I have ordinances that I don't know what they're gonna be,
Yeah,
The ordinance-
the timing doesn't
Yeah,
speak right
yeah.
with the-
so
doesn't speak right with the,
so-
but you could put this is where
absolutely,
to go. for
that's an
public
excellent idea.
notification.
And that will
And
also
that's a
give it
3-page ad in the magazine.
not only free, but it's also done in English and Spanish. So
Right.
that will go and that gets to every home,
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
so absolutely, but we cannot do the advertisement, the public notices, we can say, go here for the information.
Does
How
the,
about also putting it at the library in town, a paper, and people, if they have a desire, can come
I-
look at it.
I could ask, remember the libraries are county libraries, so most definitely I could ask, I don't see any county commissioner turning me down on that, as a matter of fact.
Fire stations,
Our county commissioner has been the one pushing this, to assist her, but not only Miami Beach, if it ever goes that way, but all the neighboring cities that have been asking
it
for this.
makes sense. The idea is disclosure, transparency, all that good stuff. When the Herald was a major publication, I'll tell you, smaller cities never used it. The Herald, they used the Daily Business Review, which is a cheaper ad, which is not that widely read by.
and the
general population.
DVR just went
And
to
that's what the issue-
online.
That's
That's
the
what the
problem. That's the problem that all cities have now said, hey, we need a method where it will not be as expensive as going to the Herald. We were very fortunate because one neighbors covered our entire city. When you go to Miami and they have to spend numerous neighbor sections to publish, so their cheapest Herald ad was the main newspaper, which is extremely expensive.
We just took a
We-
$3,000 ad for an ordinance.
Yeah.
I think I'm prepared to make a motion that we remove this requirement from the charter, and it doesn't prevent the commission from deciding if they want to do more, but at least it gives them the flexibility.
It removes the charter issue. And we're still dealing with public notice and all that stuff through the Bill of Rights. We can try to maybe strengthen that to make sure that some of these things get captured so that we don't get criticized for something that, the state the state law would preempt us though, or no?
No, the new state law gives this.
It's just,
provides
it's
an
just
option.
an option, but it's not preemption.
Right, so, I mean, your motion could be to recommend that the city commission adopt Commissioner Suarez's ordinance and also to bring back to the charter review board at your next meeting options, because we haven't had a chance to look at, are we striking the notice requirement from the charter altogether? Or are we amending the charter to say, you know, in the alternative, the commission could publish notices online pursuant to section 50?
Like the second option.
You know what I mean? So you,
The
so
second
you're,
option.
if you'd like to support Commissioner Suarez's proposal, you can make that motion today and then also direct us to bring back language to the board. It's up to you, but.
Commissioner, what would you want us to do? What are you looking for this
That'd be great. If you could support, you can send a recommendation for my,
to the commission?
yeah, and it's on the 21st, meeting.
I'll
And
second
that's second, isn't that? second
Conceptually, I mean, I have not seen the exact thing, but conceptually, I've been.
reading? I think it's second reading, right? Commissioner?
First reading.
It's first reading, okay.
Sorry.
It
reading.
has-
Not wrong.
Ron, make-
But let's make
Yeah,
sure
well,
Ron gets the
yeah,
right
I think
motion.
My motion,
Yeah.
my motion would be that, we, that we're in support of, ordinance that's being, or amendments that's being proposed by David Suarez. And we will be taking up, in, you know, future meetings, exact language for revising the charter, the notice provisions within the charter.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, let me pass it by. The ordinance that you have coming up is what? The actual change? Or
No.
is it just like a discussion to ask us to take it up?
No, it's an ordinance that would allow, so basically it's wherever the city code provides for newspaper notice, that the city could, in the alternative, use a publicly accessible website published by the county, which that tracks the language in the new state statute.
So what's left out is wherever it's said in the
Ordinance.
charter.
And that's what the,
That's what you want to do
Ordinance,
is.
the charter
Inside.
requires that the city publish the ordinances.
Right.
So, like,
That's most of what you do is
Publication.
Exactly.
well, there
Well,
are
that's-
I mean, you know, for instance, budget hearings or.
Okay, yeah, so
Elections.
your action's gonna have some consequence, whether the charter gets amended or not, is what I'm going.
Yes.
Right, it's not entire, but it's gonna get 80-70%, whatever that number is.
right.
I think it's gonna be much less.
We wanted, like, what Bernardo said, is we wanted to make sure that we don't get caught where, once they remove neighbors,
Yeah.
then
I
we're
agree.
publishing, we have to publish our ordinances on the, and every time we're gonna be,
100%.
we're gonna be coming up with an ordinance, we're gonna scratch our head, we're like, oh, that's $3,500.
Right,
You know, and then there's 7 commissioners, we all have our own ordinances, and that's well with maybe $20,000 every commission. meeting.
no,
So-
that, I get. And so I guess the process would be, we could rephrase what you were saying, support conceptually the ordinance that you've got
Yeah,
before
I
the
mean, the
council.
ordinance seems like it's a little early, but I mean, because
Because I've
you
not seen
can't
it.
do it with, unless there are other
But
things that would. be affected?
Resolutions, meeting
Okay,
notices.
okay, great. So, yeah, I think we support that
And then-
resolution, and we will be, you know, and we will be discussing a new language amending the charter. Then
You
everything
pick up
will be in
that
the charter.
piece that's not captured by where you're at. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll
That makes
second.
sense.
So I have a motion by Ronald Starkman, second by Ms. Latone.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
wait a minute, the dog wants to say something.
Hearing no.
He's in support.
He's in support. He's
He's threatening me.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, at the commission meeting, if you wanna kind of refer the charter piece to us. Because that's happened before, whether the commission has referred stuff to us. We'll take it up at the appropriate time.
Well, they don't need to.
Well, I'm doing it now.
Commission
Yeah,
already says we're gonna
I
do.
don't think it's not, I mean, your purview is looking at the entirety of the charter. It's, if you direct us to bring back language, we can do that.
Yeah, I don't think you need a, conceptually, I mean, you see it, you hear it from the clerk and the city attorney's office, and that's, we just don't want to be in a situation where every commission meeting, we're having to spend $20,000 on the ordinance is being published.
You're only, it'll be your only one.
That's.
You start with one, man.
Uh,
Anything else?
They-
Commissioner?
they-
No, listen, I heard there's some sort of, interesting items that you have on. I'm just here to hear what you guys, I'm gonna leave soon, and there's a 6 o'clock WABNA meeting, so.
Here for the entertainment.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this one goes down.
All right. All right, well, thank you so much. Then let's get back to the agenda. First item of the agenda is the minutes of the December meeting. We had it at the last meeting and it's been amended, so anybody want to make a motion?
I'll move.
Moved by Michael, second by Sam, all in favor? Aye, any opposed? Hearing none, that approved unanimously. The second item is we're back again to the, one of the election questions, so, Nick, are you gonna present this item?
Item two,
Yes, item two.
Jean is going to present item two.
Okay. So item two was the proposed amendment to Charter Section 201, which would effectuate the Charter Review Board recommended change of election dates and the change of the method of election. And I'm sorry, let me just pull that up. And at the last meeting, the comment that the board provided was when we presented to you all the proposed ballot question and text, the one comment that you had is you wanted to have more language expressly stating that under this proposal, whereby there would be one general election for the mayor in October with a runoff based upon majority vote, and there would be a separate general election for city commissioners to occur in November, but not based upon majority vote, but based upon plurality vote, meaning the highest vote getter, and therefore no need for a city commissioner runoff election. During the discussion, the board wanted to have more express language in the ballot question, expressly stating that the commissioner groups were expressly being deleted, and we've revised it to reflect that. During the discussion, the Charter Review Board, looking at the ballot question and the text, you felt that there should be more express language informing the voters that this idea of plurality election for the city commissioners would be premised upon deleting the commissioner group members. So we revised the ballot question. The text already stated that, and that's what's in front of you today. Other than that, it's the same issue that you all had in front of you. But I just want to say two things. Number one, the chairman also raised the issue during the meeting of what if there was a tie under this scenario among commissioner candidates. And we have inserted language reflecting that we think would address the issue. And the other thing that which I'd be glad to go through if you want me to, but it is within the text, and it basically states that in the event there would be a tie for city commissioner, then each of the highest vote getters for city commissioners, if that group is greater than the number of the open seats to be filled, then that group would pick a lot. And so on and so on until we have our 3 or however many commissioners are up for that race. The one point that I do just want to clarify, remember during the discussion, we were talking about part of the text of the amendment for the change of election that we drafted that you have in front of you addresses, again, the change of the election dates, which just so that the commissioner is here, just to let you all know, but this will be in the city attorney's presentation. By state law, change of election dates that are in a charter, as well as change of qualifying dates or change in terms of office necessitated by the change in those dates may be accomplished by ordinance. But the Charter Review Board felt that that was the kind of issue that should go out to the voters, and many cities in the state of Florida have nonetheless presented out to the voters. But as part of that same proposed ballot text amendments, we also have drafted related items concerning installment and unopposed candidates. That's all within the proposal you have in front of you. During the discussion from the last time, the question was asked to explain what was the meaning of Charter Section 6.04, because 6.04 is one of those sections that would need to be amended to conform to the change of the method of election that you all are proposing. And I want to clarify something. So 604 deals with a vacancy and candidacy provision. It was enacted over 10 years ago by the city of Miami Beach. And 604 says that if there is, after qualifying, there are a sufficient number of candidates such that the race goes on, meaning there is more than one candidate for the office of mayor, And under the scenario that you all have proposed, which is a pool election, that there are equal to or greater than the number of candidates for the seats to be filled. If enough of those candidates qualify, but after the qualifying date, due to the death, withdrawal, or removal of candidates, which would leave in the group of mayor fewer than 2 candidates, or in the group of commissioner seat, fewer candidates than there are seats to be filled, there is a one-time limited supplemental qualifying. I want to let you know it's never happened in Miami Beach, but nonetheless, we have that. And the supplemental qualifying would be for a limited period of time until 45 days prior to the election. If you hit the 45-day mark and there hasn't been that triggering event, then any remaining candidates are elected by operation of law. And I just want to point out, which I think we alluded to at the last meeting, we're not ready to present to you now, but the city clerk and I will be presenting to you at some future meeting. And this addresses that issue of 45 days. The reason why 45 days is the date in section 604 is because the county elections department, back when 604 was adopted, informed the city that it needed at least 45 days notice for the printing of its ballot. And after 45 days, it was too late to change the ballot. Now, we are in the process of communicating with the election supervisor, Christina White, the clerk in the city attorney's office, because she has mentioned to not just Miami Beach, but all cities in Miami-Dade County, that the county supervisor must have 90 to 120 days notice for the city to call any election from now on. There are some sections in our city charter that we may need to change certain day periods, and the 45 days in 604 may be one of those, but we'll report back to you when we hear back from Christina. So anyway, that is basically the 2.01 proposed charter amendment, and it addresses all related charter sections dealing with the related issue of the change in election dates, the change of method, and all of those related sections.
And the revised ballot question is on page 23.
Quick question.
I just want to say goodbye, guys.
Commissioner, thank you.
Good meeting. Thank you for everything. Thanks, George.
If there are less than 45 days under the current,
For the supplemental.
right, and there are, let's say there are 3 seats up for commission and we end up only with 2 candidates. So basically, those 2 people are installed.
Yeah.
And then
Well, here's the thing. They're deemed elected,
elected.
but
No,
all
installed at the time.
installation,
Yeah.
exactly, all installation will occur subsequent upon the city commission's acceptance of final election results, because you have to have all of them
Oh,
elected.
got it, yeah,
all
That,
at the same
that
time.
choice works better. Yeah, okay, so elected and installed later.
Then you'll have a vacancy.
And then does the language we have for vacancies at the commission kick in
That
so
kicks
that the
Yes.
commission can?
Yes, yes.
appoint Or whatever.
Yes,
Right.
and that is consistent with, first of all, that is not new language. That was language in section 2.01 for as long as I know. And that is consistent language with, I checked the county, I was curious how they work. If they have the same vacancy language, if there is, and basically, it's saying, if no one qualifies for a seat, it's treated as a vacancy and charter.
Yeah, that's what we want to do.
How does, what is the procedure for appointment by the commission? Like, how does that?
Okay, well, that's a separate issue.
Oh, I thought
but,
that's what, is that?
uh,
We have a
Well,
question.
well,
It's
I
one
mean,
of
we're
our-
not
One
talking
of our
about-
ballot questions is.
Right, that's a
vacancy.
separate issue that deals with the vacancy on the commission. But to address your question, the proposal that the Charter Review Board has already approved is that that there shall be, because there's different scenarios, if the vacancy is due to resignation or under the resign to run law or otherwise. But basically, the city commission, under the proposal of the Charter Review Board, will have the ability to appoint within
30
30 days from submittal of the resignation to the city clerk. And the appointment must be, the amendment proposed by Charter Review Board is by supermajority vote. Right now, it's majority vote.
Otherwise, it presumes an election.
If
We
the
don't
city
feel it
commission
for 30 days.
does not appoint, then yes, there automatically is one.
So Gene, I have a couple of questions, but following up on what Gina was saying is I think the way we were looking at it was resignation, if someone passes or someone's removed from office, what would a failure to have a qualified candidate fall? It's not one of those three necessarily. Should we
You mean
say,
if there is no candidate at
Yeah.
all? No, the
That's
charter
not tech-
already says it. The charter already says in 2.01 pre-existing language, that if no one is qualified, it's a vacancy. deemed a
okay, all right,
vacancy
it's like,
under the
I was just
code.
looking at resignations.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
You know, here's the thing, you know what I mean, board members and Mr. Chair, that with the charter, as with the city code, things are read in peri materia, which means you have to all read it, you know, kind of together.
Okay.
But there is language, you know, providing for that situation.
Two other comments. There's a question on this 604 thing. Is that like a requirement, this thing about this additional supplemental,
No, the supplemental is not that. There is a requirement, the motivating factor that caused the city to consider a charter amendment, which ended up being 6.04, was there was a state statute enacted years ago. And it said, cities shall, by ordinance or by charter provision, provide for vacancies in candidacy, meaning after qualifying has ended, where you had candidates who qualified, but then they dropped out due to death, withdrawal, or resignation. That's the wording of the statute. And it says cities shall provide a method to determine what to do in that instance, where there are fewer than 2 candidates. That's the statute.
state says that?
That's the state statute. When this was presented to the city of Miami Beach originally, when the state statute first came out, the city commission at the time felt, because there are different ways to handle it, and different cities, you know, handle it differently. But in Miami Beach, the commission then felt, you know what, if there was enough interest of the public for enough candidates to qualify where there were more than 2 candidates for each seat, then we're not just, then we are going to continue allowing that opportunity for candidates to qualify by having a supplemental qualifying. But when we sat down with the elections department, it was actually the prior clerk, because it was originally enacted, I forget when, but a while ago. When we sat down with the elections department just to make sure that they could,
Do it.
do this for us. They said, well, yes, but we need, and the original language, I think, was actually 30 days. But then a couple of years later, the elections department told us they needed to up it to 45 days. So that was presented to the voters too.
Okay,
But to
you're
answer
gonna
your
bring
question,
back
George, yeah,
something, because I, two things I'm worried about. 45 days still may not be enough, given everything I hear
Right.
about.
we are
you know,
working with the election.
60 is probably more likely, but I'm more concerned not the death or I'm worried about the mischief. You get like a stalking horse candidate to qualify to keep others out, and then they withdraw and somebody else gets added in or something like that, because you always gotta look for the reasons why. And so 60 days or that window being less, is better. So let's see what comes of it. The last thing, this may be just a clarifying thing in the text, not in the question itself. And I was trying to find the right word, but I think you said it, pool. I think we need to define or at least clarify in the text that the election in 2025 is going to take on, let's just say group 1, 2, and 3. We should call them pool A. And then the one in 27, which I guess
Yeah,
would
like
be
pool
4,
B.
5, and 6 might be
Yeah.
pool B.
You know, I thought
Just some
that too.
clarification so that there's not a confusion. There's no longer a
Group
designation
numbers.
of any kind.
Yeah, I thought, the only reason why I didn't put that in, and this might be a little awkward, but it is a way to deal with it, and that's in my head, how I thought of it. That you would just refer to them, to that group that formerly was group 1, 2, and 3 as the city commissioners whose terms are set to expire in blank. That's why I didn't, only
If
because
it
I-
works, it's fine. I just was making sure there
I
was some
guess we need to ask
designation.
the clerk. If that would work. You could do either, we could leave it as this and refer to those 3, assuming there's just 3, but it would just. be
It's always,
3.
it's
Right,
always
it
gonna be
would just
3
be
groups.
3, right. You
Right.
could refer to them as the city commissioners whose terms are set to expire in 25 or
Okay.
29, or which is
Right.
how this would be.
That works, that's fine.
Or we could put in a group, but
What do you think, Rob?
Are you referencing after that election?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the people that got elected in 25 that are now not group 1, 2, and 3, they're
Yeah.
just people elected in 25, I think there should be some classification.
Yes,
Yep.
I agree.
you know, I don't know if we need to put it in here though.
Wherever it goes.
What do you think, Rob? I don't know if we need to put it in here. Because it's just it doesn't change the manner of election
No, it doesn't.
or the method of election.
Trying to be,
But would it be helpful for purposes of identifying, you know, when
Them.
people are up?
Yeah.
yeah,
You know,
Well,
and
Yes.
Again,
that's what I'm trying to get at.
you could say those commissioners whose terms are set to expire in
What do
blank.
you want, Rob?
I
You're
would,
gonna be the one
I
that
would
submits.
prefer having after that sentence, something like pool A, you know.
Yeah.
And then
Pool B, so I could refer to that
doable.
during
and you
the,
would like pool or?
I don't care about
choose
the
the word
language.
you want, I
yeah.
think group is wrong, because you're just
Oh,
eliminating groups.
deleting
We're
groups.
deleting groups, yeah.
But
We could
otherwise,
just
we
say
could-
commissioners or A commissioners and B,
no,
Yeah.
be careful you don't get into grading them, but.
Yeah.
oh, that's a good,
That's
that's a
kind of
good,
evil,
that's
man.
a really,
But
it's good.
But we
I
can,
would
Um,
suggest, we can vote on this hopefully. And just suggest that there's some suggestion in the text. Whatever, you know, pool A,
Mhm.
pool 1, pool 2, I mean, whatever you want to do, but. If Ralph, you think that's helpful, I think it would.
I think it would be helpful, and the other thing we could do is maybe, there's not too many cities that are doing it that way, maybe I can call.
Yeah, you know, I looked around, I couldn't find it.
No, but in other words, I just to see what they
Yeah,
call it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Sorry.
could we at least, just move things
See,
along,
look,
have the board's approval of this, and then do you want us to report back to you what, so in other words, we understand you want us to put some,
something in
Title,
there that
you know, for
classifies.
ease, for
the election,
reference,
for,
but do we need to bring that back to you, or,
just
okay,
report
good,
back
we don't
whatever
need to
you
bring it
chose.
back.
Yeah, you can vote. You guys comfortable voting on this other one? Is it ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, a
Yeah.
motion from,
I'll move to accept
move from Michael
as
Bennett,
amended.
a second. Second by Sam, all in favor? Aye, any opposed?
So this
Hearing
is,
none, unanimous, and you'll just report back how you address that.
and that was item
How's
6.
that?
And I'm sorry, just to be clear, George, Mr. Chairman, were we including, leaving the 45 days as is, or?
You're gonna bring, you
Yeah,
think you're gonna
we
bring
got
that
it
back?
back from
I thought it was
Christina.
60.
Okay,
I'm good with 60 now.
But the problem is that we've asked a question to Christina White, because she's
Right,
told
yeah,
us,
She's gonna give you the answer.
Right,
Yeah.
right, because
Yeah.
it's not just this section, there are other related sections that have days that we need to, so we'll
Excellent.
report that.
okay.
We'll put that on those two. Okay, item number 3. Making some progress here, guys. 3 is the term limits.
Oh,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I was gonna ask, Mr. Mooney, the planning director, is here, to answer any questions on 1.03, the sale or lease, which Raul is going to present, but could we take that one next, and that way we can let Tom
Let's
go?
do this one and then we'll bring Tom up.
Okay,
This one should be pretty easy, hopefully. Who's presenting this
So
one?
we're on 202 now.
202, yeah.
Okay.
Tom, we'll be right with you. 202.
You know, 202, you all approved 202 at the last meeting. So you're asking, why is it back on the agenda? When we reviewed our notes, and particularly thinking about what George said, where he asked, you know, we understand it's your concern to make sure that this is exclusive of compensation. And that maybe we
No, no,
should
this-
define.
This is the term limit one. We're not yet. at
Oh, I'm
compensation.
sorry. You know, the term limit is a little bit more discussion.
Is it?
It is. So maybe if we could just proceed to the compensation
No,
and
no,
after,
no, that's the Tom.
okay.
so,
You want me to do mine then?
yes. Item 7.
Okay. If you turn to, I'm gonna walk you through it. But I'd like to do the text first and then the ballot question. So if you turn to page 40. And, you know, this is, I did an unredlined version. So this is what it's gonna look, this is what it would look like in the charter. But, I'll walk you through it and let you know what we're rearranging.
That
So-
chart that I'm sorry, Sam, the chart that was created months ago. on this? Can that?
This
is that
incorporates
available?
everything in the chart.
Right, no, is that available for us to take a look at, or you print that, or somebody, can you have somebody print that? You know what I'm talking about, that
Yeah.
matrix?
I have my chart.
Can
Right.
you make a copy? Have a copy?
Well, yeah, I have a copy, sure. This is what my chart, I don't know how up to date it is, but it'll do.
Okay, well, well, they're making copies. Go ahead.
I mean, okay, so, this is obviously the amendment to 103, which the big thing about 103 is the procedures for lease of over 10 years and sale of city property as well as vacation. And then it also seg into, Tom's discussion, which is 103C, which is the provision that we formerly had in the charter that FAR increases are subject to voter referendum, which have been preempted now by state statute. So it's good that we can have this conversation together. Before that, this is what it's actually going to look like in the charter now. This is the text. 1.03A, I left as is with the exception, and I just wanted to get feedback on this. I went back to and this has nothing to do with lease or sale. I went back to I went forward to 1.04 construction. And it's kind of, I think that 1.03 can absorb 1.04 and we can leave 1.04 kind of, you know, for future reference where we want to put something, but 1.04 really just talks about the powers of the city. Excuse me?
What, tell us what that is, 1.04.
1.04 is in the charter.
Yeah, you're referring to it, I don't know what it means.
I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it.
Okay.
It just basically says the powers of the city shall be construed liberally in favor of the city, limited only by the United States and Florida Constitution of general and special law and specific limitations to this charter. Now, I can leave that in 1.04 if it's an issue, but I think it can be just as easily rolled into 1.03, which talks about the powers of the city as the last section. Is there a problem with that, Gene?
So you're
What are we
saying
fixing?
deleting
I'm
or just taking the language in 104 and putting it in 103?
in 103, because
So
that's what,
you're just moving it.
right, so I
Because
think
the
that,
o- The only
for-
question.
I think for clarity's sake, we can do that, because like 1.04 just kind of hangs there.
Yeah, but if you're a voter,
It doesn't really-
suspicious voter,
Well, it doesn't
does
really,
it help or hurt the passage of what we're trying to do?
well, it doesn't really speak to the ballot question either. Remember, the main thrust of the ballot question that we're doing is amending the sale and lease of
Right.
city property.
Why don't we
And
just
it's a
leave-
very tight ballot question, by the way. I
why
mean,
don't we just leave it where it
you
is,
want to leave it where it is? Okay,
my sense. It's not
that's fine.
confusing.
That's fine, that's good, okay. So let's get to the meeting, the meat. What you see here, starting with subsection B, disposition of city property, and it follows my chart. This is all new language, and it basically replaces subsection B 1(2) of the charter, which currently talks about, B 1 and 2 talk about, you know, sale or lease of waterfront, sale or lease of those special tagged properties. Oh, if Ralph is gonna pass out the matrix, that'll help. And sale or lease of those, of the 60% in the convention center campus. And, sale or lease of all remaining city property. So we're cleaning all that up.
It's coming.
And this is what's gonna read, what it's gonna read from now on. The sale, exchange, or lease of 10 years or longer of any city property, okay? So we've taken out, waterfront, you know, we've taken out park, we've taken out those special set-aside properties, we've taken out the 60% for the convention center, and we've taken out general city property. So in accordance to the deliberations and motion of this board, the sale or lease of any city property now is subject to the following requirements. So I tried to do these it's in no particular order, but as you recall, the Charter Review Committee asked that we incorporate some of the requirements from the code for sale of city property into the charter so that they wouldn't be able to be changed without referendum. So now we have any city property is subject to the following. A transmittal to the finance committee by the city manager for its review. That's formerly from the code, which is now in the charter.
Shapiro ordinance stuff?
Hmm?
The Shapiro ordinance requirement?
Yes, this is from the Shapiro ordinance. The planning department analysis, which is also from the code, which is now transmitted here. The code has a minimum criteria for the planning analysis, factors that they can use. So I added the last sentence in subsection 2 on page 40. That says the minimum criteria for the analysis, for the planning analysis shall be as set forth in the city code, as same may be amended from time to time. So that means every time you want to switch around your planning analysis criteria, you don't have to amend the charter. So it gives you that flexibility, Tom. Then we have the appraisal requirement, which is also from the code, is now in the charter, and that can be waived by 5/7 vote of the commission as it can in the code.
You got a typo there, Ralph, just value instead of val,
Did I have a typo there?
rental value.
Fair market or rental value. That's verbatim from the code.
No, but it says
Val.
val.
Oh.
Oh, Val, forgive me. Sorry. Thank you, George.
Well, thank God.
So
I'm
that's
not the only one.
right, like hard valve. And finally, the last one that we took from the code is the competitive bidding requirement, which can also be waived by the commission upon 5/7 vote. So those are all from chapter 82, which this committee wanted rolled into here, so that we can't lessen it in the code or delete it in the code. And then we have what the committee agreed to. The proposed sale lease shall be referred to the planning board. Now, remember, it's a review and advisory recommendation. It's not a binding recommendation. It's advisory, and I added which will not be binding on the commission. And then we have the
Before
proposed.
we leave on, is that the one, didn't it now the planning board has to do a 5/7 or 6/7 or something like that? 4/7. Is it 4/7 on sale? Okay, which is one that is 6?
Yes,
Say again?
yes, it's a, but right now that didn't change.
Okay,
Right,
which is the one that requires a 6/7?
6/7.
that was, I think, for a vacation.
Yeah.
When we get to the vacations, I'll go over that, George.
Did we consider making it a 6/7 for that? I don't remember.
I don't remember. It
For
should
some
be, I mean,
reason,
should
that feels
stronger.
lenient, like the
Right,
5/7.
right, what we formerly had was, there was a provision that, the lease or sale of other city property. That's not
That's
convention
6/7.
center, that's not those set aside lights, was subject to planning board 4/7 and 6/7 commission.
Got it.
This board said, I want a referendum. And let the planning board be advisory
Advisory, okay.
and not
that-
binding on the
that-
commission,
That way it still gets to the commission.
right? And then finally, we have the proposed sale in subsection C. We have the proposed sale lease shall be approved by a majority of the city commission. And then this was an amendment that the charter review committee made, subject to the city commission being presented and having considered the material terms of the proposed sale or lease. And then, following a duty notice public hearing, which is also from chapter 82 that we rolled into here. And-
I don't, excuse me, I don't see
Sure.
subsection C here, I see B.
Excuse me, Ron?
I don't see a subsection C.
No, we're still on subsection B.
Oh, I have heard you. say
We're
C.
still- no.
Okay, sorry.
B
C's
covers
on that.
sale or lease. C is,
No, I think it's over here.
C covers,
See it here.
It's
covers
FAR.
the-
Oh,
right.
Here.
we tried to organize them so they're not all over the place. So the first thing we're dealing with is sale or leases.
Okay, got it.
And then finally, on subsection 7, on subsection B17, the proposed sale lease shall require approved by majority of the voters in a citywide referendum. And then at the request of this committee, which wasn't anywhere before, at least 30 days prior to the referendum date, the material terms of the proposed sale or lease shall be posted in the office of the city clerk and shall be made available for inspection by the public. All right, and then we have the exception. Is everybody following me so far?
Yeah, I have just a thought, I'll just throw it out there and see if I can get to do this, but if it requires a voter referendum
Right,
for any sale, then. it could
or
be-
lease.
Or lease, it could be like 11 months before you know, let's say the lease.
No, because we've done this before. We've called special elections. And usually when we call a special election, the proposer
Proposer pays. for it.
pays for the cost. So that hasn't affected us up until now. We don't wait for a general election. We call a special election.
Okay.
So that hasn't been an issue. This is something I want to talk to you about, and I want to ask you to reconsider the exception. And I want to tell you why, because the exception here says the referendum requirement for
Number
this
one,
section shall not apply.
Exception.
Seven.
Except.
I'm on page 41, at the top of 41,
It's hidden where it says exception.
okay?
Yeah.
So
With the underline.
is everybody following? Okay, it doesn't apply.
Everybody-
Okay,
everybody
'cause that's
Michael.
making me nervous because it's supposed to be clear.
Yeah, no, it's
All right.
clear to everybody here.
All right,
for
so
somebody.
the exception shall not apply where the total square footage of the proposed sale or lease is 1,500 square feet or less. And then I added something saying that, in other words, that's no referendum. And then I added something saying, and such square footage may not be increased beyond 1,500 square feet in a subsequent amendment to the sale or lease without triggering the referendum requirement. I didn't want anybody getting cute. So you guys were very clear about wanting an exception, but this is what I want to pose to you again, and I'm not necessarily personally in favor of any exception for this, and I'll tell you why. If indeed we're preempted now by state for having referendums with regard to increased FAR, which we are, this exception, let's say that somebody wants to buy or lease or really buy a piece of city property that's less than 1,500 square feet. But they may be deriving additional FAR from that 1,500 square feet. Originally, we would have a referendum requirement, but now we're preempted and we can no longer do that. Don't we want to keep that in where somebody is, don't we want to keep something like that in and require a referendum where even if it's less than 1,500 square feet, and I'll tell you why. If it's a lease over 10 years, we really don't have leases over 10 years that are 1,500 square feet. All our commercial leases in this building and in other parts of the city are usually 5-year leases usually with a 3-year base term and 2-year renewal option, so we can negotiate a higher price when the lease expires. The larger long-term leases that we have are, for example, for Smith and Walensky, which is obviously a long-term lease where they did improvements, Penrod's, another one, where they're going to be doing improvements. So those are certainly over 1,500 square feet. My concern is that in allowing this exception, that we may have somebody that gets cute and buys 1,500 square feet of city property that may be adjacent to their property to add FAR. And whereas before we'd have a referendum under the former provision sub C, now that we're preempted, there would be no referendum for this increased FAR. So I don't necessarily think having an
Remove
exception.
the exception.
I think we should take out the exceptions because I don't think it benefits anything.
Let me add one other concern, a different issue. What prevents city and the buyer from saying that they want to take this 3,000-foot lot,
Right,
and
divide
it
it.
into 1,500
Lots
or
for,
1,499 foot?
True, well, and we do that because to get around the 10-year requirement, we've done leases for 4 years and 11 months.
Well, and to Ron, to your last question, and I don't want to put Tom on the spot, but I don't think a 1,500 square foot lot would meet the minimum lot size requirement anyway, would it?
Not only that, but I think it would be very difficult to get a lot split to divide a 3,000 square foot lot further in town.
Yeah.
That would require planning board approval, and I don't know any 3,000 square foot lots, but as Nick said, that probably doesn't even meet the minimum of a particular zoning district, and then to try to get
So why don't we just-
planning board to approve the lots.
I mean, I'm good with Rose's recommendation. Take out the exception, yeah, just take it out
So
completely
you
and
know where it came
invite
from.
and.
All right.
I think we're just trying not to be absolute.
There's no downside to taking it
I
out.
don't remember that.
Right?
There isn't.
West
There
City
isn't,
area
and I think
because-
this committee wanted to make a statement that, that we're gonna consolidate everything. It's not just Parker waterfront here, it's not just convention center property here, it's not just those sacred lots. We're gonna say any sale, you know, which is you're selling city property, so you know, it's a big deal.
Right.
Or lease of more than 10 years, you know, you're encumbering something for 10 years or more. I just don't think the exception, I think the exception kind of eludes the total, the overall purpose.
I think by consensus.
Thank
You don't
you.
need a motion.
I have a question. So what about an air rights lease, like we were talking about, for accumulation of FAR, vacation of an alley, which we're getting to, but it's, you're only, I mean, you
Right,
don't have
well,
anything that covers air
I'm gonna
rights.
do vacations right now, but with regard to, let's say,
Air
an air
rights
rights, an air rights sale, an air rights or a ground lease would be subject to referendum.
I
Okay,
would suspect that you would have to vote on that too, if you were giving the air rights above the
Yes.
first floor of the
Because,
property.
because, like, I think that was done for what, the Betsy Hotel, I think it was done for Spo property.
Is your legal opinion that the air rights would be covered under the,
Those are private.
Beat?
This
Yes.
is only government.
Public,
This is-
well, but it goes
Over the
over a
alley.
public, it goes over,
over the alley?
yeah.
well,
It
I
goes over
believe we had
public
that
alley.
come up also with the marina. I don't know if when we were doing
They
the
were trying to
marina, there
do the
was an
marina,
air
but
rights
it wasn't
deal tied into that, and that was part of the referendum.
Right,
So yes, it would be my legal opinion that an air rights or ground lease or sale would be covered under the referendum
is
requirement.
it covered now?
If it's over 10 years for
Uh-huh.
a ground lease or an air rights lease, yes. And for an air rights sale, yes, it is covered now.
So the term property here, under B1, includes air.
Yes,
Should we say it explicitly or is that?
Yes.
I think so.
We should add
it
to
does,
that.
and that has been interpreted historically by the city attorney as being city property. So there's been no variation of opinion there.
No, I agree with you, but I understand.
Belts
that,
and
but
suspenders,
should we
you wanna
use-
add it?
Put the words.
Including air
rights.
In.
Sure.
I'm
Let's-
just
I think-
saying,
I
as
think we
opposed
need to.
instead of relying on historic interpretation.
Okay, so when we're
which
talking,
could be
so go,
litigated.
Of any city-owned property.
so going back to
inclusive of air
city-owned
rights.
property, then we're gonna put in B1, going back to city-owned property, we're gonna put
Paren, inclusive
including
of
air rights,
Yeah.
Right.
including without limitation.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing,
Yes.
since we're going back to this section before we leave, when we talk about city-owned property, we should make it clear that it's also RDA or any other city authority.
Yes, we have,
'Cause
if you
we've
wanted
had
to
this
clarify it there, but we have historically, you want including air rights and property owned by the Miami Beach
IBA.
Redevelopment Agency.
Or any other.
Or any
city
other
authority,
CRA.
Any other city authority.
Well, we have a single,
There's the North Beach CRA. also.
no, we have several CRAs,
They're all part of. the
but
city
they're all
authority.
part of the Miami Beach Redevelopment
City authority or
Agency
city
in the
entity?
code. So the
City
Miami Beach
entity?
Redevelopment Agency covers
All
all
of
the
them.
CRAs.
Okay.
Or, so, yeah, or any other city entity. I don't want to
Okay.
be creating something later or something like that. Belts and suspenders. The RDA or CRA or whatever the title.
Including that air rights.
Or would you say any other.
City entity.
City entity, yeah, that works.
We can specify, if we need to specify each one. You know,
By the
as general as possible. Right.
Miami.
I think you,
Beach
the RDA and then any, or any other city entity. I think that
Redevelopment
would.
Agency or any other city entity. Okay. I got that. So it would read in B1, it would read of any city-owned property, paragraph, including without limitation, air rights and property owned by the Miami Beach Redevelopment Agency or any other city entity. Okay? All right, so I think when you look at this, as opposed to when you formally saw it in the
Are there
charter,
joint city private entities?
what?
Are there
PPPs.
joint city?
No,
There's not.
not currently, no. Not
Is
currently.
the housing authority a city entity?
No, it's not. The
It's not
housing
state
authority is
authority.
independent by state
Okay, yeah,
statute.
I don't want to capture that.
Yeah, well, we don't have the authority. to
Right, right,
capture
that's
them.
what I'm saying. I don't want it to be.
Right, no, we don't. They're separate. So looking at sale or lease, I think now, you know, we have a path and we've cleaned up a lot of the helter skelter. So let me go to B subsection 2 on page 41, which is vacations. All right, and we talk about vacation of city property. So we track the language in the charter that's existing, the vacation, sale, exchange, lease, or any other transfer. And then I added collectively the vacation, so we just have a defined term of any city owned, and then I added this as well, or of any city interest in, because sometimes we have an easement interest. So we don't necessarily own the vacated property, but we have a public easement in it, so that would cover that. Even though it's never been an issue, that would cover that from now on.
Would that also, should we also put air rights in there, easement, for the easement?
Sure, I can put the same language, including
think we
air
should.
rights at the, or, you know,
And same, yeah, do the same phrase, because RDA or otherwise.
Although I don't think the RDA is gonna,
the RDA doesn't currently own any, streets or alleys.
and they wouldn't.
These are public streets and
But
they're
I like
usually
the-
deeded on the plat to the city of Miami Beach. But you want to include in air rights, I can do that.
I think so.
Although, yeah, I suppose you could vacate air rights over vacated property. Yeah, I suppose that can be done. Okay. Let me see. Okay, collectively of any city owner or any city interest in, and then that'll be their parentheses, including without limitation. Air rights,
You know, the air rights at easement.
right. And then in any street end, sidewalk, alley, or any other right of way, so it captures everything
That's
collected by the city, and then we go to the requirements. So this
Yeah,
is,
air rights.
this is again what the committee agreed to. It gets forwarded to finance. The planning department does a written analysis. And then, there's an independent appraisal, which
How
can be
many,
waived.
how many appraisals do you get for something like that? How many, I mean, when the city does an appraisal, I mean, as an example, there was a property in North Beach
Right.
that the last commission meeting.
Right,
And, you know, the city had gotten, I think, 3, and then the person got 1.
right. We usually get, oh, okay. Good
So
question,
you- so-
Alyssa. We usually get one appraisal. And with regard to vacated property, also, it's my experience that the person, the person requesting the vacation gets their own appraisal.
Should we,
You know,
should we
because-
have more than 1? I mean, I feel like for the Byron Carlisle, that appraisal was
Well,
just
I think what
terrible.
we want to create here is a minimum standard,
Okay,
and the minimum standard should require at least one appraisal.
At
We have the
least
right
one.
to do more, but I think the minimum standard should require one appraisal.
Normally what you do is if you do yours and you compare it to theirs, and if there's some material deviation, then you maybe get third.
I mean, it was.
Right, and
there was
usually what we
huge
always
disparity.
go by the way, is the city appraisal.
Right.
So we
So
usually
we
don't,
didn't do that, though.
well, I don't know if we did that or not, but
No,
my,
we didn't.
my recommendation,
didn't.
my
Yeah.
recommendation has always been to go with the city appraiser rather than the person who wants to
Yeah.
vacate or buy
That didn't
property, because
happen,
their
and that's
number's
why I'm
gonna be
at-
lower than ours.
That's why I'm bringing it up. I
It
just,
did happen, I think, with, Tom, I don't know if you remember, but I think it happened with 21st Street, that they did go with our appraisal, which was higher. That 21st Street vacation.
Then they waived it.
On appraisal.
Then they waived it, which they can do. Well, because sometimes for a vacation, remember, it's not necessarily the highest price. Sometimes it's the public interest. The standard for vacation is what's in the public interest of the city, so there may be a public purpose that's served by the vacation that outweighs the price. So when we vacate city property, we're not necessarily selling it.
right, but you've got an easement, but the prices that I've seen over the course of time
Right,
have been substantially lower than what, or
Sure.
in some cases, much higher.
okay.
Than
And I will
done
tell
by an
you, that's
individual.
because that's where the city commission,
We know what he's doing.
okay, at the end, that's where
He's
the
still looking for exceptions.
At the end, I didn't put exceptions. to it. At the end, that's where the city commission, uses its
They gotta use their
discretion.
judgment, and the manager has to tell them, listen, these
Yeah.
things are disparate, we need to get a third one.
That's why I'm asking, should we just,
I would,
No,
No.
I would put that in the
I
charter.
wouldn't put it in the charter.
No.
That's just gonna.
I would not.
that's a best
No.
practice. You-
I would not.
okay, all right.
Okay, so we've got planning board recommendation, we've got,
No gambling in there.
we've got an appraisal. We've also got, there is no competitive bidding for vacated property because the only ones entitled to it are the adjacent property owners. So that's out. So we have a planning board referral, which wasn't there before, for advisory recommendation. And then, we also have the proposed, the vacation shall be approved by majority vote of the commission. So after a duly noticed public hearing. And, the vacation shall be, we have the referendum requirement for all vacations. And frankly, I think that's the way it should be. I don't think there should be exceptions.
Okay,
Because if you're gonna sell it to the public, then the public has a right to decide that a public purpose is being served.
Yeah, also, thinking about, as we present this to the commission, I don't think we want to start them down the path of exceptions. And they'll come up with other ones.
I don't
You
either.
know,
I don't
think it's
either.
Better to
And-
have a
yeah.
clean one.
Yeah, yeah.
we've never seen exceptions.
And I think your biggest sell here
Sticks
is
to the
just,
point of we're just trying to,
right.
this is, we're,
I think the
Public
biggest
land
sell
is
here is
safer
when
than we're gonna-
whoever presents it to the commission is, it's such a substantial cleanup.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving finally to management and concession agreements. This is management and concession agreements for city facilities with private operators having a term of 10-year or longer. So this is like Nation, the Convention Center, MDPL, et cetera. It goes to finance. It goes to the planning board for an advisory review, which we added that, by the way. And then this was also added. The proposed agreement shall be approved by majority of vote of the city commission, having considered a final negotiated agreement and a public hearing. There was no public hearing required before for a management and concession agreement. And we usually have a negotiated agreement, but this requires a final negotiated agreement. And then finally, before Tom goes into sub C, which is the FAR thing, we have, go ahead.
Having a term of 10 years or longer,
right,
you're gonna require the referendum?
no. No, we talked about that. And this has never required a referendum. And because management and operation agreements, sometimes we lease them for $1, like to an MDPL, and sometimes for Live Nation, we talk about, a price schedule and stuff. But we haven't ordinarily done this subject to referendum. This is a business deal that's approved by the commission.
So what are we saying? It's just gonna be
It's
simple
gonna be-
majority?
A public hearing,
Right,
and also, which wasn't there before, and I think you asked for that, George.
yeah. Could it be a super majority or a simple majority?
That's up to you.
I
What do
like
you guys think?
super.
5/7?
If it
10
doesn't
years or
have to
more.
go to voters.
I like
then think
super.
it
Should be a little higher.
5/7.
5/7?
Yep.
Okay,
And one other, just a question on this, following on George's question is, what technically is the difference in terms of a lease versus a management concession agreement?
a management and operation agreement doesn't confer specific property rights, and there's express language in the agreement that says that. So in other words, if you have a lease, the only way we can eject you is by eviction. And there are rights and remedies under state statute. With regard to a management agreement, where you don't have that property right, we can eject you, we can terminate you for convenience, or we can eject you upon whatever notice we provide in the agreement. So that's the big difference.
So if somebody's gonna be making capital improvements like Swift and Valencia.
They
would
usually,
need a lease. They would not be able to.
we've had this
They
issue
want-
before, because there was a question once whether we could do the hotel lease by a management and operation agreement, and the simple fact is that nobody's gonna finance capital improvements if you have a management or operation
The other party
agreement.
would
They need a
pay.
property right that they can foreclose on.
I'm good with this, but I want
Yeah.
super majority.
You wanna do 5/7? Okay. I think that's good. And finally, then the language I added after the Housing Authority's presentation and Michael Band, I will speak to you on that. This is a new subsection D. And I mean, if you want, I can read it, but you can read it yourselves. But basically, it's a commitment to develop affordable and workforce housing. And I added for the city so that, we don't get Clevelanders coming out of our ears. I added workforce and affordable housing that is appropriate and consistent with the scale and character of the city's historic districts and neighborhoods. And then in furtherance of the commitment, the city shall require that prior to the proposed sale of city property, the city manager shall prepare or cause prepared a written analysis, kind of like a planning analysis, Tom. But I didn't say who would do it. I left it to the manager. As to whether all or a portion of the property to be sold is suitable and or appropriate for the development of affordable or workforce housing. And then it says that the city commission may consider the manager's analysis and determine whether to include a component as a condition of the proposed sale. I wanted to leave it as broad as possible, because I remember you said, Mike, even if one unit is developed, it's more than what we had. So I hope this meets with your satisfaction.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that's good.
Somebody wants to satisfy. them. So I need to put that.
You know, and my thought was, let's say they want an affordable housing component. If there's an RFP out for a sale, then they can add it as a supplement to the RFP. If there's no RFP and they're negotiating a P3 say, they can make it part of the condition of the negotiations that they include affordable housing. And you know, and now you may have people more willing to include affordable housing if it's gonna get them increased density.
So Roland, I've been becoming a lot more familiar with this because of the Live Local Act.
I'm sure you
What's
have.
going on in your city?
Yeah.
And,
Happy now.
That's why I
There-
had
there is-
character and
at
scale.
least in there's no definition of workforce. They talk about low, very low, low, and moderate
Right,
is what the state has determined.
we
Or the county.
define,
So is there where I'm going is there a local, when we talk, workforce sounds great, but is it defined somewhere?
In our code.
it's defined in our
Defined in-
consolidated plan and in our code. And I think we should leave it like that, because if we put a definition in the charter that's subsequently outmoded. But it is defined in
As long
our
as it's
code,
defined.
and we also define it in our 5-year consolidated plan, which, as you know, we submit to HUD every 5 years.
Okay. So just
And in our code, Tom, workforce is defined as.
140%?
One,
Yeah, workforce and affordable are both defined under.
The state defines moderate as 120%.
120,
Yeah,
yeah.
median
Workforce
income.
is probably 140.
Yeah.
Okay,
So live local is up to, is 120,
yes.
but our code defines workforce as 140.
Okay, that's good. I just want to make sure that.
I have a question on this, just trying to understand what this in practical terms means. For
This is-
example, you
This-
know,
In practical terms, with this, with,
well, I'll give you, I mean, we have a situation right now in the city, for example, where this would apply. Was in place, which is the bargaining. And, you know, there's one group that might think that it makes more, you know, it's about a piece of property across the convention center, and maybe it makes most, the thing that would make the most sense is to sell it, take the money, and then, yeah, you could put some of that into affordable housing somewhere else. And then there's another group that says, this should be the site for the affordable housing.
Right.
We should do it here. Would this, if this was part of our charter, would this affect that in some way? How would this affect that?
well, let's say, okay, let's say that we have a buyer for city property. And, you know, they're gonna develop it, and Tom or the city manager, let's say, does an analysis that this would be a great site for workforce and affordable housing, and we negotiate with the buyer and require that require by covenant in the purchase and sale agreement that they provide a workforce and affordable housing component. You know, that's where something like that would work to our benefit. But I think when we talked to the housing authority, and also to make this palatable to the commission, we didn't want to impose a requirement on them. We didn't want to bind them to something that they may not want to bind themselves to.
Well, what does this do? I'm still, I mean, I understand.
Well,
Yeah, you know,
it
that's
expresses, like the housing authority said,
Yeah, but
It
that's
expresses
the
our
charter.
commitment.
This is the charter. This is not, you know, this is saying, this is something that's supposed to be not just, I mean, it should be specific things that.
well, it is specific, because it
Says you've got
talks
a written
about,
analysis.
if you're selling city property, then you have to have this analysis as
Every
part of the
city-
analysis.
Every sale of city property now requires this analysis.
Yeah.
Will, yes,
And-
would require, it's just like a planning analysis, just like you have a planning analysis now.
Well, so would it be, the analysis would be done internally by a planning department?
Whoever the manager, you know, I left it open because the manager may want it done by the Department of Housing and Economic Development as opposed to planning, but I imagine that they will both be you know, they will both be in on this.
But Ron,
How much time would it take to do something like this? If you, now, if we're requiring this on every piece of
And I
property.
think. it
They're
would
not gonna,
depend on the
they're not gonna
property,
design it
The
for them.
location of the property, and as Raul pointed out, it probably would be a multi-department. effort,
Yeah.
Housing, planning, economic development.
Yeah, but, and every single piece of property, regardless of where it is?
Yeah,
Look, theoretically, that analysis should take place before you consider selling.
because and also,
Maybe that many pieces of
wait,
property
Ron,
get sold.
they could come back and say it's not suitable for affordable or workforce housing.
Well, what determines whether it's suitable?
The city manager's analysis.
Yeah,
well,
but,
the,
what
the
I'm
value, the value of the, probably the value of the property.
well, yeah, that's
the-
kind of where I'm getting at here is.
Are they gonna develop?
We're saying something has to be here, you know, defined as, you know, whether it's appropriate or suit. What would disqualify? It isn't clear here what would disqualify a property from being.
When you're
Right.
developing a commercial property, let's say you're buying city property to build a garage or to build a theater or a cultural center. That, in my mind, a cultural center might disqualify it from being a hub for affordable housing.
It's gonna depend
But
on
if you're
the-
developing a mixed use project,
Yeah, but
that
that's
might
not-
be
this is
more.
not- This is not a
But
function
Ron-
of the project, right?
Yeah,
This is
well-
simply says that, says the piece of property is suitable.
I think it's both. I think it's both a function
I
of the
think
proposed
also,
transaction.
We
and-
rarely sell property unless it's small property without the idea of what it's gonna be developed as. I know, you know, if we put the west lots out for sale, I don't think we're just gonna sell the west lots. Without
Exactly.
having-
What I was gonna say is, we don't, I wouldn't expect the city, look, the city has received unsolicited proposals. In those instances, something like this would be good. You know, the city hasn't thought about it, but also,
I'm not
but
saying that they're
the
not
city's
cases,
not going to, I think, just put out land because it's surplus.
Right,
They should first review and see if there's other uses for it, and hopefully that's an infrequent occurrence. They
Well, yeah,
Put
well,
land out.
I mean, there are a lot of uses that it could be for, but I'm just wondering if. How, I can't, I don't see a situation the way this is written, because it says nothing about what the proposed sale is or anything. It
right.
simply says
Well,
Any,
Well, we don't know.
whether all or portion property sold would be suitable. And there, I can see many situations where you could say, yes, but suitable for housing. It doesn't say economic. It doesn't
well,
say
Ron,
whether it
this
makes
is what I
sense
would
economically.
envision, but Ron, yes, good question. This is what I would envision for that. When we added the planning analysis to, as a requirement to the city code, we separately, we asked the planning department or whatever department has ownership over it to draft criteria for what that analysis would comprise of, and that criteria was approved by the commission. By the same token, I would imagine that the criteria for the affordability analysis would be developed by,
Why don't you pick up that language you have here,
So
the
what you're
Romanet
saying-
2,
Yeah.
the minimum criteria for the planning analysis shall be set forth in the city code and say may amend it from time to time, maybe that sentence in here.
well, I could say shall be set forth by resolution as amended. Okay, that's good.
Does that help?
Okay,
Well,
does that
yeah,
help,
if-
Ron?
If you said, if you put it in D.
That's what I'm saying.
Indeed, yeah.
Put it in D, right, and further.
Pick up that language and put it in D.
Sale contractor, the positive further analysis, whether all or portion of it is, and somehow I would like economically, you know, some sort of sense of that it makes economic, because suitability just
It's
simply means, can you
subjective.
build a house, can you build?
So would you like to
buildings?
make economically feasible?
Yes.
Okay,
That's,
okay.
Economically, yeah. Well.
Suitable
economically-
and-
That is, so how about, how about this, Ron?
Yeah, that's-
Well, what does economically
Don't you also
feasible
want them
mean?
consistent-
You know, I thought
consistent with
that-
The neighborhood?
I get where you're coming from, but I thought
Getting
this was
into that.
kind of like an olive branch
That's right.
to the to the housing authority.
I don't see, I don't think that we should put something in here that introduces ambiguity and creates an administrative process without any clear direction. other
Okay,
than,
fair enough.
you
So
know, yeah, that's. my-
would you like me, would you then, I think that George had a solution for that, that the criteria for the affordable housing analysis shall be developed by resolution approved by the city commission as amended from, and maybe amended from time to time. How does that sound?
That's good.
Okay, okay, fair enough.
it's suitability, it's economics, it's all kinds
Yeah,
of
but
factors.
What
as long
about-
as there's,
what
as long as
about-
there's a set of criteria, because right now,
Fair enough.
I would.
Okay, I think,
And-
I put that,
Elizabeth's trying to get in.
Right, well,
Okay.
and conforms to the neighborhood.
Yeah, that's,
I
character.
mean, that, and it keeps
But
the
that's already in
character.
there.
well, that's what I put that
Right,
there.
it's in there, it says, and character of
Yeah.
the city's.
Where is that?
It
Look
says
at
in
the,
terms of the commitment, the
the
city
first
shall
sentence.
require that,
For the
I'm
third
sorry,
line.
the first sentence, to develop affordable workforce housing that is appropriate
Okay, I see it.
and consistent with the scale and character. of
Okay.
the
The
city's
analysis will
historic
include, suitability, a character, an economic,
Right,
bunch of other
you know,
things,
because, I mean, it becomes sort of a silly exercise if they say, yeah, you could build it here, it'll cost $100 million, but. You know, it just becomes a silly exercise if we don't first come up with, to say that there's some specific criteria that they're gonna use.
It doesn't force it to be done,
Correct.
it
So
just
it's already
says,
in there.
we're gonna look at it.
Right, that's all it does.
You know, there's no enacting character of this, all it does.
Right.
is suggest that you need to look at this, if it works, great.
Right, if it doesn't work for any reason,
Correct.
Yeah, but it implies by, written analysis, it's what, it implies that more than a cursory look.
You
but
just wanted
implies
a little bit more.
it does, but I don't think it requires like a backbreaking work either. You know, I mean, I've seen us prepare RFPs and put this type of thing in without any analysis.
We'll be covered as long as there's a set of.
Okay, well, you can, I think you are the perfect candidate to help develop the criteria. How's that?
Well,
He'll
that's
do it.
something, I've
He'll
always
pull those
said-
weeds.
yeah.
I'm gonna defer that to the audit
yeah.
committee.
To the audit, the audit committee should develop the criteria.
Is it gonna take an inordinate amount of time to, do this or resources?
I don't envision that it does.
Property that's being.
I just don't want it to then go to the commission and become a political football, saying, oh, yeah, it's suitable. We should be doing it here, and, you know, and then they're
It should be
arguing over, well, but it doesn't make practical sense for this reason. So if the commission has a set of criteria that we
Okay.
agree
It's
on,
gonna, but
then they can
Okay.
apply that.
But I will tell you that the reason that I think a criteria is an upgrade is that I have already seen the commission willy-nilly apply affordable housing to proposals, you know, as a matter, without any analysis. So why not do an analysis on that as well? You know, I also think, and, you know, when the housing authority came before us, they wanted something, you know, and I didn't really want to make a requirement of it, you know, like this project shall require affordable workforce housing. Once I saw it all.
I think you got it.
we're good.
I think we're good. I
We're
think
good.
We're good, as long as we.
You're
have some
good?
We're
criteria.
good.
Okay, I'm gonna add that language shall be set forth in a resolution approved by the city commission.
Subject to change from time to time.
Okay. So if you kindly turn to the ballot question, which I had such a horrible time with. All these amendments. So that's on page 39. And I think, Nick, here we were at 75 words exactly. So this is how the question would read.
I think you may have a problem.
What?
Mhm.
You include, in the first sentence, you include management concession agreements of 10 years or more. Require, the first thing you're saying is a voter approval. Didn't we say we weren't gonna require a vote of those?
No, I don't include voter approval for management and concession agreements. When we talk about,
In the ballot question.
in the bullet, it specifically says voter approval by majority vote for sale or lease of city
Yes.
property
Yes.
and vacation of right of ways.
Should we put air rights in there?
It just said, no, I think I'm at too many words.
That doesn't need to go in the ballot question, that's.
What?
I would,
Just-
I think you
no.
picked that up in the text, but I read it and I was confused.
Well,
Would that,
we talk about,
create a false expectation?
okay,
This
wait.
is where we
So
go.
we talk about the first
no
part
votes.
is, shall 103 be amended? So approval of sale or lease of 10 years or more of city property, vacation of rights of way, and management concession agreements 10 years or more require. And then we talk the first bullet, voter approval by majority vote for sale or lease and vacation of right of ways. Then we go to 2, public hearing for management and concession agreement approvals. And then number 3, incorporation of code requirements. Do you think it's misleading?
I think,
No, no,
I
it
think.
was confusing
what
if I
might be
didn't read it
better-
entirely.
What, George, voter approval by majority vote, except for management section.
You know, again, I have to argue that you know, we're at 75 words and there's a lot to put in here.
Fewer words, because you don't have to repeat. You just say voter approval by majority vote,
Except,
except for, and you can.
No,
You know, I don't like the way that reads. I just don't, I,
No,
you know, I
no,
think
no.
that's even more confusing to the voter. But if you want me to toy with it, I could.
no,
Well,
Well, I
No.
had done it a different way before, and then in consulting with the deputy, we consolidated all the voter approvals in one. I
Yeah,
could do
I
voter
would-
approval for sale and lease, voter approval for
no,
vacations.
no. How about-
No, we're good.
But let me suggest instead, in bullet 2, I'm okay with that, in bullet 1, what about in bullet 2, instead of public hearing, we require a 5/7 vote for
Okay,
management concession. We just added that and delete the public hearing,
okay.
Yeah.
I could do that.
because that feels, you know, more strong.
Okay, and then the public hearing is covered under, the 3rd bullet.
Right.
Okay. So it would say 5/7 vote, city, okay. Commission
Supermajority
5/7 vote for management concession agreement approvals. Okay. And then incorporation of code requirements for public
We
bidding,
got public hearing.
planning analysis, appraisal, and public hearing. That applies to all of them.
Okay,
so
How
you
does
good
that-
with that, George?
And
that
So,
reads
so
well.
You're not concerned about.
Yes.
bullet one anymore?
The what?
Bullet one, you're not concerned about it?
No,
I would love to, Gene. Yeah,
come to a conclusion, but,
I know you're an
Okay,
expert
good.
on this, so I will.
It'll work.
But I get,
Okay.
All right.
okay, so can we move this and approve this?
You can move it, but I
Okay.
think we should bring back final ballot question. and
Fine,
check.
to show it how it'll finally
Yeah.
look, but I'd like to knock this one out if I can.
Yeah.
So, the motion for this as amended with the 5/7
Sure.
and the edits that were approved in the text.
Who moved
So
it?
moved. I'll move it. As
So
amended.
moves it,
Okay.
second by, Michael Band, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
Okay, and
opposed?
again, thank
Hearing
you
none.
all for your input. You're so engaged in this that really, thank you. Thank you. No, seriously, thank you. Done great work.
This one,
Okay, so George, would you just like me to include this in the packet for next week?
next week, yeah.
As
next
opposed to
meeting's
presenting
packet.
it all over
Exactly,
again?
just redline it.
I will redline it, yes.
And we'll just, you know, that's just for confirmation, but it's been approved.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And then,
Well, you wanted to ask something for Tom?
Yeah, so 1.03C is the requirement in our charter that requires voter approval prior to any increase in FAR, right? That's a separate matter from the sale or lease of city property. And I've presented to you on this issue twice before, although it's been a long time. As you know, last year, the state legislature amended the Community Planning Act to prohibit a referendum or initiative on a land development regulation. So that is going to, that has severely limited the extent to which we can enforce the referendum requirement for future FAR increases. However, the state left intact a separate provision grandfathering city charters that had a referendum process for map amendments if the charter provision was in effect as of June 2011, which our charter provision was. So we have debated internally over how or whether to conform section 1.03C to this recent change in state law without compromising the grandfathering we have, right? Because I think as soon as we start doing surgery, I don't want it to seem like we've now amended something. So what I wanted to preview for the board, because it's not on your agenda today, is we're thinking about drafting maybe a sentence at the end of 1.03C, providing that nothing in this paragraph, and again, this paragraph is the referendum requirement for future FAR increases, right? That nothing in this paragraph shall be construed to require a referendum that is otherwise prohibited by the Community Planning Act, and I would cite to that section. But I wanted to preview that for you because we're not totally preempted on FAR increases, and we're, it's our obligation to give effect to as much of, as much as the charter is is not preempted by this recent change. And I'd like to bring that language back to you. if you can-
I keep coming back on this. I mean, the state preempts us. We don't need to therefore ratify that. We can just leave it and allow the state to preempt us. Why would we put a vote of of our citizens to kind of ratify what the state did? It feels like superfluous and kind of, rubbing it in their faces.
But you talk about leaving it as is.
Just leave it as is and let the
And
argument be what it is.
leaving it as is an option, but we're going through this, every 10-year exercise, and there is an opportunity to maybe clarify and make the charter provision consistent with the recent change in state law. It might, could give us a stronger argument if we required a referendum for rezoning in the future and we were challenged on it.
The challenge for me is whether I would have to add that to my question. I'm
no.
already at,
No,
I don't,
At
well,
max.
well, I don't think we need to put that
Okay.
in the sale or lease question.
okay, because that's a challenge.
I also am not, I think it could be, but I don't think it needs to be, because it's really, it's totally different issue.
no, it shouldn't be part of this, because
Well,
it'll
but-
jeopardize the
But
passage.
it's
It
103.
It could, that's right. It could be in that question, because just like, but the comp question, I know, but I just want to say that. Because just like for the comp question for 202, we have related matters, and for 203, we have related matters.
Yeah,
As
yeah,
Raul
I
just said,
understand.
it is all 103.
But
Right.
it's political.
Here's
You
what-
don't
Right,
have to
I don't
admit
wanna
it,
put
but-
Here's
something
my
on the
challenge.
ballot that
That
will have
riles them
people
up.
wanna vote for something and
Right.
then it's a poison pill.
That's my challenge, that
Right.
it may be either, first of all, we're stretched in words, but it also may be a poison pill.
Correct.
And by the way, I was not suggesting that. That's not what I was suggesting.
So here,
but-
bring back the question. The question I would probably at the end of the day, we're gonna have to decide how many questions in total. And if that one alone stands alone and it's one that we jettison because it's
That-
question number 12, then
Yeah,
Oh,
and I don't,
yeah,
I
the
don't-
preemption, that wouldn't be a standalone.
that wouldn't be a
Right.
standalone question. What we're between is either, merging it with the sale or lease, which I do not want to do. I think it really is a separate issue. Or finding room for it in maybe one of our other questions, for instance, dealing with the catch-all question of recent changes to state law or upstate. We have internal discussion about
Alright,
that,
well, let's
which
just
I
have
don't wanna
to-
get into right now, but.
I'm curious, isn't there a fair amount of litigation
Yes,
currently going on involving the preemption and everything else?
That's a separate statute though, and a separate issue. That's the Live Local Act. So there's two,
So this is not subject
no,
to current litigation?
no, this is a separate statute which prohibits
zoning by reference.
zoning by referent, which by the way was already disfavored, but the legislature made the prohibition even broader.
Do what you're gonna do, bring it, and
Okay.
we'll see, but
I know you don't like it.
I don't like it,
Yeah,
because it's,
yeah.
I would just.
what if they vote yeah and no?
I would just leave it the way it is
Yeah.
and interpret it for the
Exactly.
commission, which I think you've already done by,
We have
Memorandum.
We have already,
Right.
but we have.
so.
But there are other provisions in the charter that we have spoken about that the board hasn't voted on it yet,
Or that are
that are
obsolete.
already
That's where I want to,
preempted that we're
that's
addressing.
where I want to
And
put
there
it.
could be legal issues without getting into it, although we could discuss it individually with the board members. There could be legal issues in not referencing
Oh,
other preempted
Right.
matters, or things that are partially preempted.
All right,
Right.
let's go. We got 30 minutes, I
Okay.
think. Let's go back to the items that we skipped.
Okay.
The ordinance. Do we
We
need
go
to
back
from
to-
Tom?
Oh.
Tom,
No, Tom was here on sale lease.
Anything you wanna say?
On FAR, and
sure, no pass up an opportunity to keep your mouth shut.
I will invite Tom back when we do address 1.03C. But,
Yeah, just let me know.
I will. Thank you.
The only one I wouldn't be able to make would be April 16th.
Okay, but I think we'll do it before then. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. All right, so we back to number 3 now?
Could we go to the comp?
I think that's number, is that
That's
number
on
3?
page 27,
that's number
Number
3.
3 on the agenda, right?
That is number 3, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
the compensation. Okay, so at the last meeting,
wait.
you all approved the compensation. The reason why we brought it back to, we want to clarify something. Number one, George had raised the point of putting in expressly what is within the compensation. We thought about it and we decided that is a good thing to do. So we included after compensation comprising salary, stipend, allowances, which reflects the presentation that we had. The other point that we want to make, which is more a, for purposes of making a record, we had discussed, or you all and the chairman at the last meeting made a point emphasizing that we need to make sure that this is what the elected officials are getting for compensation. So what we did was, in the second bullet point, after establishing sole, we inserted the word exclusive instead of total. The reason why we did that is because you know how we have discussed, Raul and Nick and I have discussed with you before, that even though the city charter talks about compensation being 10 and 6, and it says salary shall have to be amended by approval, at some point, the city interpreted that, we assume, to mean that it is not the exclusive compensation.
Right.
So by putting the words in now, we will be able to say, this is the exclusive compensation. So, and the text has not changed other than to conform to the changes that I just alluded to. So you have in front of you, you could vote on this and we could be done with this now.
I have a suggestion, but go ahead. Melissa.
I think we're gonna go to the same thing, so if you
No,
go,
no, go
go ahead.
Francis, you're
I-
in the chair.
I'd like to talk about their current, I guess. I feel like it's not, are we grossed up for CPI?
We did.
We
That's how
did?
We got the
I
55.
just wanted to make sure because there've been some questions asked of me. And I wanted that on record that it
So
was grossed up.
the 55 and the 60 is the current,
I
so
didn't
the
think so.
55 is the current 41,000
I believe it's-
plus 30%.
Yeah, this doesn't reflect CPI.
No.
This was the numbers that the committee felt comfortable with.
Okay, let me rephrase it then. 41,000 plus 30%. Assume that 3% per year, which is what generally the CPI has been, except for the past 2 years or even last year, is what you get to 55. And we said
Right.
3% per
You
year
multiply
over the
by
next
10
10 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in 10 years, the next charter review can say needs to be relooked at.
Yeah, I think we had a previous question based on CPI, which failed.
We
Right.
did, one of the
Yeah,
versions.
yeah, that's
we
a,
did, right.
an automatic
Right,
CPI is
it-
gonna
No,
fail.
it
I think-
hasn't gone.
Just
I
to
think
answer your
you've been
point.
asked questions also, and I'm, okay,
Yeah,
I
so
just
that's,
wanna make
that, for the record, that's how the numbers calculate.
okay.
And it kind of makes sense. Now, if we want to make it higher number to allow for more CPI, that's a question, for the committee. But that's how we got to 55 and 60.
I think I'm okay with this number. If they have if they want to on from the day, let's say, well, let's raise it.
Okay.
Do that.
What-
Right, but the memo should indicate that how we got to 55 and 60 was that, we took
What
41.
you said, it was the dollar amount times 3% CPI times 10 years, with the idea being next charter review.
Correct.
Thank you.
10 years.
That's it.
So we just need the figure for,
I,
the mayoral compensation, whatever that dollar amount is.
so, a little
Uh-oh.
different than what you were gonna go with. This last bullet, I still would suggest that we lead with the larger number. And
What
then
do you-
speak to the 10,000. So where you say, instead of charters 10,000 mayoral compensation included with the current X,
Yeah,
I almost invert that and say, instead of the current X.
Wait.
Instead of the 45,000 mayoral earnings, including the $10,000 charter
And
compensation.
the reason we're hesitant about we were hesitant about including that information at all is
Mhm.
because it's not in the chart, right?
Okay.
So I understand that it's the current state of affairs, but it's not in the chart. So I think,
But you're
keeping it-
including it here. I'm just saying,
I know,
Stay
but
first.
as a reference to what we currently
Right.
pay them. But I don't want to make it seem like this number is in the charter. It's not.
That's
in the
right.
I
charter.
understand.
That's
but-
right.
But here what I'm gonna say. So picking up where instead of.
right.
Instead of the $45,000 mayoral earnings, including the $10,000 charter compensation. And the commissioner's $41,000 earning, including the $6,000 charter compensation. It's the exact same words, I'm just inverting them. I
It's
want
just a
them to
little
see
more
the
clear.
larger number
Yeah.
first.
It's more clear.
And
Yeah,
it's
but,
more,
well,
it's
I would
more
not-
reflective.
I wouldn't recommend it either, because the, uh, the question that is being asked of the voters is the charter change.
Yeah.
And the emphasis has to be on the 10 and 6 for purposes of making a clear. Again, we're not here to make record breaking challenging. But we're just saying that's our recommendation, because we have to make clear that the emphasis is upon, the change is the, of the, 10,000, 6,000. And that really has to be the primary
I
emphasis.
mean, I have to tell you, I didn't want to
Instead,
include,
it's critical.
I didn't want to include the numbers at all.
I agree with
Uh,
that. We all agree
you know,
with that.
But
Yeah,
so, how do I say this?
We're trying to make
People,
it more
people are not,
There's not much.
I honestly, I mean, I don't think people are gonna vote for this because
Based on
the
history.
general feel,
Mhm.
well, yeah, but also this is viewed as a part-time job and we don't have a strong mayoral system. We have a city manager. And people look at it like, oh, well, they're gonna get this, which for most people would be a full-time job salary and another job as well. The ability to hold another job as well. So I'm just saying, I'm not quite sure, I mean, I don't think it's gonna pass. I'm just saying.
That, we know that, and that's a different issue.
Well,
but yeah,
you know
but-
what,
I
if the
mean,
board
are we-
wants,
are we-
how about this, if the board wants, because George alluded to it earlier, that, right now, the way we figure, you're at least 9 ballot questions. And they're complicated ballot questions. These are not simple questions.
Yeah.
So if the board wishes at the next meeting, we can give you an itemization of the ballot question.
But we're not gonna drop it.
And
That's
that-
up to
we'll
you.
get that
That's-
anyway, but-
that's
But
your
wait,
call.
but that's a call for the board to make. I mean, if
That's
the board
right.
doesn't want to proceed with this.
Yeah.
Right.
you know,
But I
Right.
kind of still, I sort of agree with George. I think that we should put the language the way that it makes it clearer to the voters, that there is the existing compensation and the higher amount. And if, and you, when you present this to the commission, can say you want to reverse it, and the commission can decide, well, okay, we want to reverse it, but it doesn't make it legally not valid. Because you're just saying it isn't as clear, but, we're trying to make a
Here's-
different point
Well,
here.
wait,
Okay.
Yeah.
just as counsel to the board, I think my responsibility is delivering a question that does
Legal.
clearly represent what the measure will accomplish. And so I
But all the
think
words are there,
I'm
it's just
very
converted.
hesitant to do anything with these numbers that are not in the charter.
But
So-
That's
Nick,
right.
what I'm saying is, I read every word that's in here, I just read them in a different way.
But you're placing greater emphasis upon
The bigger number.
the dollar amount that they're,
Saying that they-
that they're
that first.
getting, that we have said is different than the charter compensation amount.
But that's where
And-
we
and
are
the
today,
reason-
I mean,
by
we
the way,
exist in the
yeah.
world that we exist
I mean-
today, the number's different, and it has been for 20 years.
The reason for that, by the way, is that the charter establishes the salary. Well, but it says salary.
Right,
Well,
says
you're
both.
saying-
It says both.
It says both.
yeah.
But it establishes those numbers as salary, and then it says.
No,
As a
it
base.
establishes those numbers as compensation.
Yeah, they say them both, both
and
words
that-
are used
That any increase
in salary.
in
shall
salary
require
shall, right, I
voter
put
approval.
the, right, exactly.
Yeah.
We need to take.
Any increase in salary,
Salary
not
out.
increase in
Right,
compensation.
right.
Well, that's what this is gonna do eventually, but, so, I mean,
I'm
If-
okay with, I understand the advice from council. I'd still be willing to go forward with it. with
is
the
it
way-
illegal the way we're saying it? Or the way
How
I'm
are
saying
you
it?
saying?
Let me
Yeah.
read it again for you. So exactly the words that are there, where it starts with the italicized instead, right?
Well, why don't you read it,
I'm
George?
gonna read it now. Instead, pick up from the italicized word instead. It'll say, instead of the 40, I'm picking a number because it's a blank here, but instead of a
Yeah.
$45,000 mayoral earnings, including the $10,000 charter compensation and the commissioner's $41,000 earning, including the $6,000 charter compensation.
I would not recommend that because the inference is that right now under the charter authorizes the 41,000. And that is not what
I'm
the
saying
charter
charter compensation
technically
over
says.
here.
right? By saying, establishing sole exclusive annual compensation of 60 for mayor and 55 for commissioners along with pension, instead of the current blank dollars for the mayor. And that gives the inference as, again, we're not here to make a record for anyone. We're just telling you, we are concerned that the emphasis there places, that language would place greater emphasis and give the appearance to the voters as that is the dollar amount that's in the charter that's being changed, and that's not. It's the $10,000 and $6,000 amount.
Yeah, that, you know, the
But then when you
nuance is,
add
You're
but
right.
the reality is what the reality is. That's what I'm trying to, you know.
But you know what,
So-
George, for purposes of the lawsuits, remember how we have discussed, we're starting to sound like a broken record, but it's 101.161 is the Florida statute. You have to state the chief purpose of the measure in a way that does not mislead the voters. There are cases that are based upon these type of issues, and you're right, it's all nuanced and it's all wording. But that's why we're.
Well, then
making our recommendation.
how do you explain and be transparent with the voters that there's a X amount of dollars that are allocated
That's
towards?
not in the charter anywhere.
That's not in the,
That's-
We've given
that's-
people that we've been
so-
paying for
so-
30 years.
so-
Here is
so-
at least
so
about the fact
there's
that
no, exactly, there's
that
no,
they can vote all this extra
they can
money for
vote themselves whatever they want. There's no call, I guess there's no, availability for,
It violates the
we have to
spirit of what
somehow
was intended,
let
right?
the voters know that there's extra money out there that they're currently receiving that is not, I guess, apparent.
And we're doing that, and we're doing
Right.
that by saying, at the board's request, we've included, in parentheticals, instead of charters, $10,000 mayoral compensation, and this is the language.
Right.
Included within current dollar earnings, and commissioners' $6,000 compensation, including within current $41,000 earnings.
I would like to see this question move forward. I'd like to see this question passed. If you guys are gonna tell me that this is not gonna be legal or is gonna jeopardize
And
its
by adding
passage, then I'm
numbers.
gonna leave it the way it is and go with that, but I did wanna, it has more chance of success if we inverted these things around.
Nick, are you
And then
saying,
trend-
Well,
you just don't? want
That's
to
your
include
reading,
numbers at
George,
all?
that may not be.
Because
I get it,
But
but
we're
you know,
just saying
the
that, right,
committee's here to
We're-
make
no,
it
no, we
political,
appreciate
not
that.
just legal.
we appreciate that, but we're just saying that emphasis is not upon the change, the current charter change, and that's our concern. And and again, I know we've discussed this, but remember, there is the educational effort. If the city commission does decide to put this on the ballot, there's the educational movement that will happen. And that's
So what's
where,
the-
if the board is appointed by the city commission to
What's
engage
the
in
will of the
that.
board, you lawyers, any advice you want to give us?
Yep.
Well,
Go,
it's
Sam.
not a legal interpretation. It's, in your view, how do we persuade the voters without running afoul of our legal officers represent countries? And what George's view is, and Ron's, it sounds better if we present this to them. It's more likely to pass if they come from that way. I don't know that it's really, unless you guys tell me something different. If it's in there, it's in there. Are the voters confused?
Yep.
I don't think so, but
I'm looking at it a little different. I'm not, I don't want, you're saying that I want it this way because I want it to pass. That's not true. I'm want it that way because.
you don't
I
want it to
think-
pass?
because- no,
Why we even?
No, I
Okay,
want
say
it
this
that
in here.
way because I think it's more, I think the opposite position. I think voters have been confused and not understood this for a long time.
I agree.
And that, if they want to vote on it with information and look at it in terms of what it really, the financial impact is, then it should be the other set of numbers that has the impact.
May I just say one final point on this?
Yeah.
There is a line of case law that talks about, for purposes of complying with the duty to inform the voter to the best you can within 75 words, because like Earl said, it is a real task to get all this within 75 words, in a way that informs the voters of the chief purpose of the measure. There is case law that talks about basically you have to inform what you're changing the voters from to. So when you look at the second ballot point, it says establishing the compensation to be 60 and changing it instead of the 10 and 6.
Right.
So that's the from and to. That is why we are saying the best chance of success for purposes of doing our best to ensure, and we know that, of course, that's what you all want to, that the voters are fully informed of this and not misled, is referencing the salary is going to this and it's being changed from instead of this number.
We've bounced this one around a million times. Does
Right.
anybody want to make a motion that's written? You'll have to fill in that blank of whatever the mayor's current.
We had talked
Yeah,
before
we just
about,
need that.
we had talked before
Yes, I
about
know.
explaining this. By explaining what the status quo was and how we were changing it. I know that that can't be 75 words or less, but it could accompany what we're doing with an explanation. What happened to that idea? Is that still possible?
So we are, the question does express what the status quo is and what the change is to. So, because it says, it refers to what's in the charter, which is the 10,000 and the 6,000, right? So the second bullet is where we say, you know, establishing sole exclusive annual compensation. And by the way, we added comprising salary, stipend, allowances of 60,000 for mayor and 55,000 for commissioners. That's the change
No,
too,
but
right?
The best we're gonna get.
And then instead of charters, $10,000 mayoral compensation, that's the change from.
Charter's present,
question,
maybe you need the word
Sam.
present in there? Charter's present?
Well, we say current.
Sam,
current?
correct me if I'm wrong, your question is, how did we arrive at? Was that what you're saying?
Well, it's more a question of how we explain it, not how we arrived at it, but how we explain it so that it's clear.
Explain how we arrived.
Well, and I think,
Yes.
I think what you're getting at is that's part of,
That's the
you know,
voter guide and
that's,
whatever else.
you know, the educational.
And the memo that we
component of this,
are gonna
And your
put.
final report and any town hall meetings that you hold.
I'll go with whatever you say.
I'm gonna go with it. as
All
written.
right.
We'll fill in this blank.
Just go with it.
Julie, you were gonna move it? Did I hear you move it?
I moved
Julie moves
to,
it. Second it. Sam second. We'll fill in this blank. It's whatever that number was. I think it was 46, maybe 45. But whatever that number was from a previous item.
Yeah.
For the current mayor's thing.
But I think the handbook explaining why we did this is really
Yeah,
important.
that's one. Our memo needs to, especially how we got the map. So.
No, there's.
Right, but keep in mind that
You know that.
that this proposal also has thematically the counterpart of the duty to request the ethics, and the reason for that is because that's one of the bases for requesting the higher compensation.
Right.
Okay, I got a motion and a second.
Is the city allowed to put out something explaining it? Ron's saying no, that the city can't put out something explaining the proposals or the.
We have a
ordinances.
public
So we
notice.
can no longer, issue a voter's guide, which is why you haven't seen one in the last couple of years. But we
Okay.
can have, we can have,
Public
objectives.
meetings.
We can have
you
those
tape
meetings.
it, You
We-
can then have it on the web to
we can have
show.
information on the website. We've done that for.
Yeah,
for-
and you can have public forums, and
Yeah.
at the public forums, you can.
Well, is there an organization, like an auxiliary organization of
They could
some
do
sort that could do
If
it?
somebody
Chamber
has a
could do it.
forum,
So long,
Chamber or somebody, yeah.
right, so long as there's no coordination with the city in terms of city funds.
People on the road.
There you go.
What we can't do anymore is sort of the direct,
Oh,
Sam, we can't do the direct mail.
Yeah, it can't come from the city.
Okay,
Got it.
I got a motion and a second, as written, you'll fill in the mayor's number
Yeah.
here. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? Hearing none, passes. 6-0.
So now we're on 202, the term limit. So we drafted what the board asked us to draft at the last meeting. You wanted to have consecutive instead of lifetime terms. And a suggestion came up of establishing a mandatory 4-year gap from the time that an individual has served his or her term limit to the time that they again can serve the city. So we've drafted that. But what we wanted to say are 2 things here. Number 1, we've included an express exception. Wait, excuse, oh, I'm sorry, the handout. Look at the handout, not the one on the, in the agenda packet. We have included an express exception referencing the existing language in 202, which expressly defines what is a term. And in defining the term of 202, and keep in mind, this is existing language, the charter section says that service by a person in filling a vacancy for less than 50% of a term is not considered a term. And also, service by any commission member for less than 50% of a term is not a term. So in order to adhere to that definition, we put that in as an exception to this 4-year waiting period. I do want to tell you, though, that in looking at this, you know, just like any restriction on candidacy, there are constitutional standards that have to be met if the city were ever to be challenged. And by way of example, years ago when the city enacted, there is a durational residency requirement for qualifying for elected office in the city of Miami Beach. And basically what it says is that in order for anyone to qualify as a candidate in the city of Miami Beach, they had to have resided for 1 year prior. That is referred to as durational residency. When that was enacted, the then Charter Review Board was advised, and they did, to put into the record their rational basis explaining the governmental need to have that. And the basis for that residential duration, for the durational residency requirement, was that to ensure, and it was supported by the record, was to ensure that individuals running for office were residents of the city for a sufficient amount of time, so they knew the issues in Miami Beach. They knew what this city, unique issues to this city. And there are cases also supporting 1 year residential durational residency. Anyway, long story short, the only point why I bring that out is because during this discussion, there should be some record support of your rational basis for number one. Why are you, although I think George has already stated it, why the proposal of the Charter Review Board to provide for consecutive instead of lifetime terms. But secondly, why do you want to have the waiting, that gap different than the existing gap? The existing gap, like we say, the city attorney's office has always interpreted when we had the consecutive term limits, because remember, there was consecutive term limits on the books before the 2014 amendment changing the term limits to lifetime. But when there was consecutive term limits, if that was interpreted as an individual member of the commissioner has 2 4-year term limit, and a mayor has 3 2-year term limits. Once they have served those terms that have been consecutive, they have to wait till the next term happens. In Miami Beach, we have biennial elections every 2 years. And because we don't have group races, every 2 years, we have a mayor's race and we have a commission's race. So the opinion that we've always given is that it's a 2-year gap. Now you want to change it to a 4-year gap. So there should be some discussion by the board to put it into the record. So it advises the city commission to, in the matter appears before them, as to what is the rational basis for the consecutive and for increasing the waiting period to 4 years.
Like to have that discussion too, because I think I'm gonna change my mind.
Yeah, I have also changed my mind on this. I've been
I'm-
contacted by a couple of commissioners and who've made some very good points as to why this may not be a good idea.
What do you think? Let's hear the
So,
point.
yeah, so I don't know whether.
Don't say who.
I
but
won't say who
tell me
now, but,
what the points are.
but a couple of people who's come through on the commission, and among them is, you know, the concern that if somebody's been on the commission for a period of time before, they get a natural advantage by their name recognition and make their fundraising ability. Second, that if you know you've got a limited term, you've got the pressure to get more things done. And if you know, if we know, well, I did this, wait, I'll take care of that my next time I come around or whatever. That it just creates a sense of urgency. It also provides for fresh blood.
That-
Which is, I think, also important. I mean, we have that rule now in our federal government, president, and so forth. So I think the benefits, I think the disadvantages outweigh the benefits. Clearly, the benefit is we have some great commissioner who wants to come back again. But I'm more concerned about the other situation, which is that new people running are disadvantaged.
Like a city of Miami situation, entrenched.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
I'm gonna rescind
That's
my
a good
vote
example.
on this.
So that's a great.
Well, we're not voting yet.
I know, but I'm
Yeah,
just
so
saying.
You wanna add
My
anything
my
to?
points were the same as Ron's. I feel like, I think in the beginning, if you go back to when we were first discussing this, I initially said I like term limits. And then I was sort of, it sounds okay. But then when I started thinking about it, and again, I don't want to have the same people over and over and over again. I mean, look what just happened. I mean, we've got a more resident friendly commission now than we have had in a very long time. And it seems that way.
Well, look at
Whether it
Miami,
is.
where you
And I don't
can't
want,
have any reform.
that's right.
You know, I've just gotten 2 new commissioners, and I'm a resident of Coconut Grove. And finally got 2 new commissioners, and still, you have entrenched commissioners with special interests just blocking them at every pass. And, if you want to be a reformed commission, it's kind of hard to not have term
But didn't
limits.
the city go from that entrenched to now term limits? And didn't the county also go? from
They did.
Entrenched to term limits?
And they voted, right.
Well,
We've had
right,
term-
but I want to say something about the county. That was done in 2012, 2011. The county kind of had to do it. And I mean, the reason why I say they had to is because if they didn't, there would be an initiative that would have presented that, because that was in the works.
But the
It was in the
county's
air.
But the
It was in the air.
county's term limits were new term limits. I think it's 12 years, not 8 years. But they didn't create a lifetime ban. They just term limited.
But
Because they
had
didn't
no-
have any.
They had no term.
They
Well, I
didn't have any.
understand. We've had term limits for 30 years or so, since
What's
over
the,
in the 90s.
what's the reason for changing this? I honestly don't know.
This only happened, this is only,
No,
8
today,
years or-
this,
no.
why are we
the
changing?
current lifetime ban was only 8 years ago.
Well, that came from the.
2014.
I know,
But what is the reason for changing?
But I
Yeah,
didn't,
what
I
is the
didn't bring
reason?
that up. I don't-
Yeah, what is the reason?
The reason for
For changing.
Your board member is
Uh-huh.
asking what is the reason for changing?
I don't know the
lifetime
answer.
to consecutive?
Pardon me?
I don't know why we're changing it from,
It was brought up by a member and it was
I know,
discussed.
but
I mean, a
Well,
lifetime term limit has been very
I'll tell you what I
successful
think it
in
is.
terms of promoting new blood.
I don't remember who brought it up. That's why. That's
I
what I'm
think the original discussion was that we didn't want to limit ourselves to the suggestion that if somebody was a good commissioner, good mayor, whatever, he or she should not be allowed to return to that position with a reasonable period, 4 years. I think we all compromised on or agreed to that 4 years would allow then new blood, new commissioners to do whatever.
I feel, maybe
I'll
I'm.
use an example. When I spoke,
But
when it came
Good
up.
commissioner is subjective.
Yeah, no, but so let's use, I'm gonna use a name. I'll use Saul Gross.
Okay.
He was a commissioner. He term limited, I think it was 2009, maybe when Saul was term limited. 2007, 2009. That's 15 years ago. What if he decided, I've got time now. I'm retired. I'd like to run for commission again and offer my service.
Well, he could run for
The
mayor.
voters, I know that now, but he could, what if he wanted to run for commission?
But the point is, he has an option to be back on the commission. He could.
But let
run
us,
for
let,
mayor.
I mean, I get your point. I see what you're trying to do. I know
No,
what you,
I'm-
but no, I'm not trying to, I don't
Just
mean
say-
that way. I mean, let the board debate it. Let's not debate it among the board and the.
We're not, yeah, we're
Well,
not.
Remember back in-
Let's-
right, I remember back in 2014 when it first came up, because I was city attorney and that was one of my first questions, the lifetime term limits was to bring new blood and diversity into the commission. And by that account, I think it worked very well, because you had commissioners that would just sit it out and run over and over and over again, but you did bring a lot of diversity
which
and a lot
commissioner
of,
reached their
a lot
term
of
and didn't
commissioners
run again?
representing residents
Oh,
as opposed to
okay.
developments, a lot of commissioners that were gay, Hispanic, so there was a lot of
Raul-
diversity brought to the commission.
Raul, I think,
I'm just quoting from the record at that time.
my understanding is one person reached their term limit and then ran again.
That
think
is
in the
not,
history
that
of
is
it-
not correct.
Who else ran
That is,
that had already reached?
that
their
was
term?
not the reason
No, no,
for,
I'm
for
asking
bringing this forward.
what.
I'm talking about what was discussed on the record. Because
My-
you're
my
making it
question
sound
is
like
different.
we did it as something.
No, 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 no,
punitive.
no, no, I'm not
We did
suggesting
not.
that. I'm not suggesting people. do that.
Okay,
Well, I'm suggesting that the history
Kind
of
of
the
are.
city, no, let me rephrase my statement. That in the history of the city.
no, I think in the
history of
prior,
the city, in the last 40 years,
if you want me to name names, I can.
in the last 40 years, have we had a circumstance, or how many circumstances have we had where a person served,
And
met
came
there,
back to
and
serve.
then ran again?
A few. A few,
That have term limited and then ran again
yes. Yes,
in the last 40 years?
yes. Yes, going back in the city, yes. Going back farther than you, yes. But again,
See, okay, let me give you my view on this. I think that,
just look at Miami. I mean, really.
no, I'm talking about Miami Beach. I think
Okay.
that Ron's point about, well, if you have somebody that served, they have the advantage of sitting out, and then they have naming recognition, the ability to raise money. I think that that's not accurate, because they also have a record that's gonna trail them. And if they were not a good commissioner or a good mayor, that's gonna trail them and handicap them. But if they were in the eyes of the voters, somebody that was good, somebody that they wanted to return to office, somebody that accomplished a lot, whatever the reasons, they had the ability to do that without being lifetime term limited.
But there's a.
Sitting out 4 years is sufficient amount of time to continue to have fresh blood, but also not eliminate somebody who was a competent, capable, effective
And the voters get to
commissioner or
decide
mayor.
at the end.
But-
Sorry?
but
The
subject
voters
that.
get to decide. at
And,
the end.
exactly, and the voters,
Giving
and
voters a
in the end
choice.
of the day, it's, a person's record, whoever it is, it's gonna be an advantage or a disadvantage, if they were good or bad.
It is,
So-
I just want to bring something, again, fact, not advocacy. But the lifetime term limits has had a very good unintended consequences, because it's kind of turned ex-commissioners that were very good as commissioners into very strong community activists. First of all, they're not prohibited from serving on boards, which a lot of them have done. And second of all, I don't think without term limits, there would be an organization like Miami Beach United, or, that would have that kind of strength, where a lot of ex-commissioners have really voiced their platform. So I don't think we've necessarily silenced the voice of good commissioners, other than saying, which what you're saying is, Sam, that they can't run again.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that silence.
that
the
may be
voice.
enough.
I'm suggesting that the voters aren't given that opportunity
Right.
anymore.
But I also want to say this. Miami Beach has a very short memory as far as,
Country does too, apparently.
yeah, okay, but that's true. I mean, and I would also use that as an example of term limits. So
We have term limits. I'm just saying
I
that,
know, I'm glad.
but it's a lifetime.
I just think we have a short memory and I don't think.
I think elections
I'm just gonna-
help refresh people's memories, because when somebody does something, that's improper, wrong, unethical, whatever it is, believe me, there's gonna be the negative
They also
advertising to
make
remind
stuff up.
everybody
They
about it.
also make stuff up and nobody knows what's true and what's not true, and I'm.
That's, then you're criticizing the electoral process.
Well,
Really.
they are, but
Well,
they do.
the electoral process isn't perfect. because
No, it's
there-
not.
Money does play a role, and
It's true.
you,
But this
And-
is mine.
there are people who've been on the commissions who have been perhaps more pro-business, pro-development than resident. And those people will very quickly attract kind of money from those interests and to bring them back, and people voting may or may not know their position. The other concern I have, and I still would vote for Linda to change this, but that I think for any reason we're gonna go forward with this, is you've got the ability for somebody now to run to be mayor for 3 terms, run for commissioner. then become mayor, then become
I'm just,
commissioner. So that
That's true.
simply,
That's,
that, and a bare minimum would have to be.
so
addressed.
Julie, where do you stand on,
Why do
or your
we-
opinion on it?
I mean, if somebody served
Sorry.
for 8 years consecutively as commissioner, why isn't that? Why can't we just consider that? Thank you for serving us well as voters and, you know, if you want to continue to serve this community, you can do so in your own
Come to an
capacity.
MVP.
I just, it's a license, that is, to me, unnecessary. I feel like that's a long time. It's a long time. And I just don't, feel like it's very cut and dry to say, you know, if they,
Lifetime, it's a long time too.
well, it is, but I don't think that, to your point earlier, that if they, you know, how the voters feel, I feel like it's very, you know, you and I could look at the same service and consider them successful or not having been successful.
It's subjective.
Exactly, in general, I can find you a long list of names for why we should not have term limits at all. And a long list of names
But
for
those
why,
are your,
hang on.
their opinions.
But every
Yeah, I'm
election
going
is
there.
comes down to.
And then there's a list of names of people that you would probably, thank God there are term limits. And there's a history, and your list might be similar or different than mine, and everybody, but that's why you have an election. So that your opinion and my opinion is asked for, and otherwise, my opinion doesn't get to be asked because that person doesn't make it to the ballot.
I just don't
And
think that
so-
I'm gonna change. I just don't think there are people that
Yeah,
can
I'm not-
continue to run over and over and go and just keep on.
I agree with
You
you.
know,
I
doing-
think change is good. and I think it's healthy.
I'm not,
And
We're dividing three and three.
Well, I haven't heard from him. Where are you on this?
I like it.
How do we break it down?
I'm
Draw lots.
ready.
is there a tiebreaker?
No, a tie vote, the
I
issue
failed.
does not,
I
it
failed,
does
so-
not pass.
One way or the other, yeah.
So let's, you know, I mean, anybody want to make a motion?
I'll make a motion, we adopt.
Motion by Sam, anyone second by, Michael, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All against?
I,
No, against,
So
so
it's
it sounds like it's a 3-3 and a fail.
So I'm sorry, just for the record, so, because we're recording it, so it is Julie Basner is a no, Elizabeth Fatone is a no, and Ronald Starkman is a no.
And by the way, when your report is presented to the city commission, unless you direct otherwise, I would think as a matter of public record, when some history is given of what the board considered, the city commission will be made aware of the fact that you all considered this, you know, and the vote.
Right.
That's right.
And also, if you have to cut something from the list, this also, I
This
don't
would
think.
probably be the one,
Yeah.
yeah.
Would be the one, you know.
and I think the voters will understand that more. I mean, it just doesn't.
Okay, we done, it's done.
Okay, so now we're on section 203.
Okay, what is, this is the.
203 deals with power of the city
We're in
commission.
item 5,
And
Trouble.
this is page 33 of your agenda.
item 5, for the record.
And the board wanted to have gift rule prohibiting any gift, not just those as proscribed by current law, prohibited gifts exceeding $100 from a lobbyist or vendor from any gift. And the board directed us at the last meeting, you wanted stronger language to let the voters know, it isn't just that members of the commission are prohibited from accepting any gift of any value from a lobbyist or vendor, but to let the voters know it's making this a stricter
I like that
prohibition.
word. Yeah,
So we
I
did that in
do
the first bullet point.
Yay.
And the second bullet point, again, under the heading of thematic ballot measures that relate to similar issues that have a connectivity. This has a connectivity in the sense that it also is a restriction on powers of the commission. So the first one is gifts, and the second is non-interference with city administration.
Okay, good one. Sorry.
33.
Page 33.
Oh, thank you.
This is the non-interference that the Inspector General had recommended
Yes.
to us, so I think you matched it well there.
Yeah, I'm good with this. I don't love this idea of limitations on commission members' involvement in city administration. I mean, I don't think we wouldn't want people to think that commissioners aren't free to meet with
That's where the
staff
text-
And they've been,
Mhm.
they're not
I think the
involved,
text clarifies
you
that.
know.
But we're just saying limits, establishing limitations on their involvement.
It's been silent for a long, but that's what, Joe had recommended, but the text, I think, kind of gets more detailed.
Yeah.
Ron, when you start
Yeah.
getting down, you start to see the, they can,
I thought we agreed to
it's
say,
direct.
I thought we agreed to say further restricting instead of establishing stricter. I think that, I don't know. I'm
I could
weird.
live with either one.
I guess I'm,
Yeah.
Further,
Yeah, I like further restricting.
I'm
I like-
kind of a word person.
I like that better.
guys,
Can we
you
do
listen to
that?
that?
we
Instead of
change that?
establishing, it's say further restricting,
Yeah,
instead of establishing stricter.
Well, we're establishing, so would be, establishing restrictions. That's what you're saying?
No, bullet number one, we're going back to
Oh.
bullet number one, where it says establishing stricter, what Elizabeth is suggesting is further restricting.
Oh, the reason is that we
Yeah.
can't change state or county law.
We're not restricting
So-
state or county law.
We're
Oh, you're establishing something
Yeah.
that's more
Yeah.
strict than that.
But isn't that what this says though? Further restricting? Doesn't
Further
that?
restricting makes it sound like we were changing.
Like you're
state or
changing
county
that law.
I see
get
what
it.
you're saying.
I get it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's
I
just
can
a
live with
little
that.
tweak.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
that's fine.
I'm good with this one, Ron, I mean, you were expressing some concern about
That's so
the
interesting.
bullet two.
Yeah, that, I don't think we
It's not
spent a whole lot of time on it. To me, it kind of, when I read it quickly, it sort of sounded like we were saying commissioners cannot be involved with city staff.
Where's that, Ron?
Bullet two,
Oh, I see. I was reading the text.
yeah.
Now, when you read the text, though, it says, except prohibited, the commission shall be permitted to communicate and make inquiries and administrative personnel. But it clarifies it down here.
Yeah, but this part doesn't get.
It doesn't
go to the
make
voters.
sense.
And I'm just,
But where does the text land? When the ballot question, does the text get printed together with the ballot question?
In the, no,
In the-
well, not on the ballot, but in the resolution calling for the election.
right,
We are required to, by city law, have the ballot question and the text attached.
Okay, so that's what's gonna be in the charter,
Okay,
but people won't see it.
I have an idea, but,
Right.
I won't push it too hard here. Establishing guidelines on commissioners, members' involvement in administration, including no
I
consolidated orders.
prefer the word limitation. That's my preference, but I just want you.
We're staying with the restricting theme, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're trying to.
Yeah, okay,
Identify.
I mean, it's not worth a lot more discussion.
Are you saying to change the second bullet to restricting? Is that what you're saying?
No.
No.
I think,
No,
I think what you've drafted, I think.
Right.
I like it.
You
I
wanna
like
make a
it.
motion?
I'm in the minority on this one, and I don't feel strongly about it.
So a motion on this one. Anybody want to make a motion? Motion
Second.
by Sam, second by Elizabeth. All in favor?
All right.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, passes 6-0. And it's gift rules and.
okay, so now we're on the issue of Article 5, dealing with budget and finance, which addresses let me find on the agenda, that is on page.
We just did. the
Oh,
charter.
that's on
Number
page
five.
37 of your agenda.
Yes, item 6, guys.
So at the last meeting, the board discussed the suggestion of requiring city elections for the voter approval for the city's issuance of GO bonds to be limited to the city's biennial November election. And just to be clear, because we have this other proposal that will provide for 2 general elections, this ballot question will specify the November general election, which we know if the proposal of the Charter Review Board gets on the ballot, and if the voters approve it, then there would be an election in October for the mayor, but the November general election will be for the commissioners, and coincidentally, there may be a runoff for the mayor at the same time. So that's what you wanted to do. We had discussed issues of inserting a waiver provision for the city commission in the event of an emergency, and there was some discussion on that. So you told us to go back and look at this and work this up, and we have worked it up, and this is what you have in front of you, but we want to say a couple of things on this. Number one, and Nick could probably speak to this better than I, the city attorney's office reached out to bond counsel to make sure they were okay with this, and,
Yeah, and our bond counsel had two interesting points. One is that, how we, how we define that emergency exception. We want to make sure we draft it very narrowly, because we wouldn't want that to be a basis to a challenge to a bond issuance. And then the second point was that, and it was a very technical point, but that not in every instance does the issuance of a geo bond
Yeah.
require voter approval. And I think he said if it was, for instance, if we were,
I think it's talking about
Refunding?
referendum bonds, but we don't.
Revenue bonds.
Yeah, he's,
Revenue bonds don't.
revenue
require-
bonds don't go out
Right, that's what it
for
was,
voter
yeah.
approval.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, he said, if you are going to have that language,
What,
to reference the Florida constitutional provision and limiting it and citing that to make clear, we're only referring to those geo bonds under article. I have it.
Would it just say state required referendum or something like that?
Well, again, we'd have to rework this to see if we're within the 75 words, but the point is, bond counsel gave us, a specific statutory reference to the, constitutional reference.
yeah.
To make sure it only affects those bonds
Yeah,
under
but-
subsection A of Article 12.
Article 12, section 12A.
Yeah.
of the Constitution.
But here's the bigger issue that we are concerned with.
I know. But
Um,
I have no emotion. I know.
there is a provision,
Coming, right? I feel it.
state election law, and the statute dealing, the current statute dealing with bond referenda is within the Florida election code. And that current statute, we know, basically says cities can hold bond referendum elections at any election. And there are other little requirements, but that's the basic rule. So, what you all are thinking of doing is restricting it just to a particular election. There is a Florida statute that expressly says that statutes that are in the Florida election code that expressly apply to municipalities, such as the bond referendum statute, may not conflict with state law. So the question is, would having a charter provision that limits elections on bond matters to a specific date conflict with a state statute that specifically has no such limitation?
I think we're just being
We
more
looked at the
strict.
issue of conflict, and the cases of conflict all have pretty much the same standard. And they say, which is just kind of, I mean, I know you all know this, matter of just common sense, that cities, and I just say cities, just, looking at what we're doing now, you cannot make unlawful that which the state has expressly made lawful. And you can't make unlawful that which, or, you know what I mean? You can't make lawful that which they have said lawful, and you can't make lawful that which they have said unlawful. The statute that provides that municipalities, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing, can have elections at any date, say, it shall be lawful for counties, municipalities to hold elections at any date. So what we would be doing would be basically saying, it shall not be lawful to hold election. So long story short is this. Our feeling,
Very
our
good.
recommendation is we don't feel, we're concerned with this.
I'm
And
not
the only
going-
way that we could recommend is if we requested Attorney General opinion and got that. Now, having said that, it takes at least 6 months to get an opinion from the Attorney General's office.
We're just gonna be more restrictive. and It's a
Or we could go
voluntary
to
thing.
Tallahassee.
No, it's not voluntary.
We're-
What we're saying,
referendum.
George, is the statute raises an issue of conflict. That based upon that, we are concerned legally. The city, if we're challenged on a bond issue, I mean, we want to be right on everything, but on a bond issue, it's a heavy election. I mean, all the elections are, but
So
you know,
state
particularly on
law
bond issues.
does not allow us, I'm saying, it preempts us, does not allow us to.
Without an
require
opinion-
Elections to only be in November.
That's not what I'm
That's it.
That's what I heard.
We would be adopting a rule that directly conflicts with state statute, and I don't think, we can take lightly putting something like that in the charter on the issuance of general obligation bonds. what Jean is suggesting is that if we want to proceed with that, that the board could recommend that the commission request an opinion of the Attorney General.
Right, because the
And
board,
that takes 6 months.
at least
at
6 months.
least.
I would tell you, we
Can you
requested
guys-
an opinion.
Before we
from the
ask for a
attorney-
request for, can you guys search and see if if an opinion has been issued in the past?
Of course,
We
we,
can look,
we,
yeah,
cer- no,
Do that?
I mean, I searched that.
Oh, you did? All right.
Yeah, I mean, everything that we're doing, we research before we go to the board.
So
You know,
this was
what
on
we do
our
is our process, we take what you say, drafting is a separate issue. But initially, as lawyers, we know we first have to research the issue.
But this is
We have
on our
researched
agenda a
it,
couple
yeah.
of times now, and this is the first time I'm hearing of this.
No, this was just brought up last
It was
month
just brought up
for the
last
first
month,
time,
the Geo bond being
as
at
new,
the,
as new business.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I remember it was just real hard.
Yeah, I mean.
So let's table this for now. Let's
Yeah, I
defer it for
think
now.
so.
We'll
I
see.
mean, we need to think about it because what we're trying to do is make a a little more difficult for commissioners to do this deal bond. But what I'm hearing is that restricting it to certain dates is not something we can do. Maybe there's something else.
Is there
we can
something else
do
you can do?
that would make it, hurdles that they would have to go through before they could issue a deal bond.
Well, maybe what the city could do, because under the heading of, I mean, we'd have to think about it a little bit more, but so in order to avoid a conflict, could there be any other restrictions imposed on the city commission in the calling of an election? Like maybe you could, suggest certain factors that the city commission, if they chose to have it at, on certain election dates, maybe to put in certain conditions, although even that would be, I think, a conflict too. No, I don't know.
Unless it's maybe an analysis, like as a city analysis, like maybe sending it to the finance committee or, something along those lines, something that's.
Right, but it would
internal.
have to be recommended, it could be binding, obviously. on the
Right,
city
yeah,
commission,
But an
We
internal
have a
process.
similar ordinance for general bonds.
Right.
Yeah, let's
You
table
worked
this.
on
Oh, you do? What is that, Raoul?
What's that?
What is that?
I think you worked on this. Commissioner Dermer had an ordinance.
Yeah,
Requiring that
I-
certain administrative requirements be fulfilled before calling for a general bond election.
But we're talking about general bond
What?
election.
We have an ordinance on the book. Maybe, I don't know whether you want to expand on it, but I know you
Bring it back,
worked
yeah,
on
let's
that
look
with
at that.
Commissioner Dermer.
What is it?
I don't remember now, but
It's like a
it was
federal
around the time of the Mount
ordinance.
Sinai. There's the Mount Sinai Miami Heartbeat.
Exactly.
All right, let's table
I'll
this for
make a
now.
motion to
Yeah, we're gonna
adjourn.
table that. If you guys can let
Second.
that go off.
But I do agree that.
You've been busy today. I've done a lot of work today.
All right,
don't wanna
let's-
wrap
let's-
up that.
Let's see what the right hurdles are. So let's table that for now. We'll leave that to the, pardon me? There's been a motion. I know, I've not heard it. It's not a proper motion. I need to ask for public comment. Any public comments?
None
We had a gentleman here earlier, but,
We outlasted them.
yeah.
We wore them down.
Pardon?
But the mayor's on.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so no public comment, so I guess a motion to adjourn is in order, seconded, and,
So the next meeting will be Bill of Rights.
Bill of Rights,
And
bring
what
this
day?
back
I want to
and
make,
see if there's a way that we can work on something with.
What, bring the
Geo
Geo bond?
what's the,
Why don't we just confirm the
With
date? So-
We tabled it, so we're gonna. see if
Next
there's other
meeting.
solutions to what
Oh,
we're trying to do.
the ordinance.
March
the-
4th.
The Durham
What's the
ordinance.
next
And maybe,
Fourth?
maybe it was by right.
Next meeting is when?
No, it's in the code. I
Wait,
think
what?
it's under
March
finance.
March 4th.
It's like March finance, where it says general. obligation.
March 4th.
Yep.
Is that the next meeting?
Yep.
Thank
Find
you
out.
all.
It's in the
I
code.
don't know that I'm here.
It's been real, it's
So
been
the
fun,
next
but it's been real fun.
That, and the Bill of Rights.
I'm sorry?
Oh, you think you know with my husband.
And Nick, I do wanna have,
Oh, that's your husband.
for information, no need for action, but
Well, he
information,
doesn't know. We just
the
get-
questions that have already
He's
been
a
approved.
very nice guy.
Can you just provide a list?
You've already-